Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all our participants, dignitaries, speakers, panelists, and industry representatives to the IMC CEO Conclave, Reigniting Growth and Accelerating Social Equity, organized by the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. All participants will be muted to avoid any disturbances during the course of the session. Kindly post all your relevant queries in the chat section so that they can be addressed as time permits. So, as we initiate the conference, I invite Mr. Juzar Khorakiwala, President, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to present the welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Khorakiwala.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Selvi. On behalf of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the IMC CEO Conclave, Reigniting Growth and Accelerating Social Equity. This is the first time that we have had a CEO Conclave at the Chamber. Friends, if you look at the last 10 to 14 years, which is a very short period from a business perspective, from a corporate perspective, we have had at least 5 or 6 major crises in the last 10 to 14 years. The first one being 2008, the financial crisis, which saw large organizations in the West come to ashes, as a matter of fact, the financial crisis that we saw. The second was, in some ways, demonetization, which affected the entire business within India in terms of especially the informal sector, which got into a real bind, and we saw the impact on the formal sector as well. Then came the GST, which again reshaped the entire way of working, and it took a couple of years to stabilize as we see it now. After that, we had the pandemic. The pandemic, of course, we all know, we have been living through it in the last 2-3 years, and we have seen how it has impacted our entire work from home, digitization of the organizations, and digitization in generally globally. So the entire work pattern has changed through the pandemic. And then after the pandemic was getting almost over, we were faced with the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has again destabilized the entire supply chain. We have seen inflation in India. We have seen inflation in the United States. We are seeing a lot of tightening of central bank rates, which as we speak is happening around us. And with all these uncertainties that I just mentioned, we have a phenomenon which is in the last 10-15 years, we have seen the rise of China. This rise of China has also brought its own challenges and opportunities to all of us. And then we had the Trump factor in the earlier president of the United States, Trump, which also a lot of uncertainty surrounded the trade between the West and China and the world at large. So the point I'm making is that the CEO's role, the top man's role, with all these crises happening in the last 10 to 14 years, has irrevocably changed. There's a huge element of adaptation leaderships have to do in both strategic and innovative ways in order to turn these challenges into opportunities. They also have had to look at balancing issues such as labor shortage versus employee safety, production versus supply chain or logistics, revenues versus profits, etc. They have to think in innovative ways to ensure future resiliency. Leaders have also to become influencers and change agents to ensure that the whole company works as a single organism towards a particular set of goals. These goals can't be achieved by working alone or in silos. Top leadership has had to de-risk the business and also deleverage businesses with all these crises. Business is, of course, a critical factor in forging the system. Business experts have incredible influence over societies and ecosystems. Rightly, people increasingly expect the companies they work for, buy from and invest in to channel their knowledge, resources, and influence towards tackling society's toughest challenges, including social inequality. When we develop a positive work environment that's equal for all people, not only can our employees experience job satisfaction, but our companies can become much more productive. This event today is part of a larger effort to gather views of business leaders to ignite growth after this pandemic and the Ukraine war, and how social and economic equity plays an important role while defining growth and accepting innovative ways. So let me, with this few remarks, let me welcome, give a warm welcome to our special speakers this afternoon, Mr. Dharmakirti Joshi, Chief Economics, CRISIL, Mr. Harjeev Singh Swani, Director, Swani Spice Mills Private Limited, Mr. KVS Manian, President, Corporate Institutional and Investment Banking, Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited, Mr. A. Balasubramaniam, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC Limited, Mr. Atul Joshi, Founder and CEO, Oyster Capital Management and Advisory, Dr. Shubhada Rao, Founder, Quantico Research, Dr. Habil Khorakiwala, Founder, Chairman, Wokard Limited, Mr. Sanjay Datta, Chief Underwriting, Reinsurance and Claims, ICICI Lombard General Insurance Company Limited, Dr. Akhil Shahani, Managing Director, Shahani Group, and Mr. Mahesh Sharma, MD and CEO, SBI Life Insurance Company Limited, for sparing their valuable time and being with us this afternoon. Before I end, I'll just say a few words about IMC, which was established in 1907, with its headquarters in Mumbai. The IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry is an apex chamber of commerce and industry in the Western region, with a membership base of over 5,000 members and over 150 trade associations affiliated to it. Together, it represents and advocates the interests of over 400,000 members, business and industry establishments across the country from diverse sectors of our industry. So with these few words, thank you very much for being part of this CEO Conclave, and I turn it over to Mr. Ramakrishna, our Chairman of our Industry and Trade Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khorakiwala. I would like to invite Dr. R. Ramakrishnan, Chairman, Industry and Trade Committee, IMC, to present the introductory address. Mr. Ramakrishnan has had a successful career spanning 39 plus years as a professional manager and leader across Polycab Group, Bajaj Electricals and Asian Paints. He is currently the chairman of Transformia Advisors LLP, a consulting firm that focuses on change and transformation. Over to you, Dr. Ramakrishnan.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure and honor being here amongst friends. Thank you so much, Juzar Bhai, for that wonderful remarks and setting the tone for today. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the online event, the IMC CEO Conclave, Reigniting Growth and Accelerating Social Equity. I would just like to take a couple of minutes to explain the context of why we are doing this. You see, India was one of the topmost performing economies post-pandemic amongst the G20. And then when things were looking good, we had the Russia-Ukraine crisis. There is COVID again rearing its head. Inflation is running amok across the world. We are also impacted due to high commodity prices. I have just seen a report that in the month of May, the wholesale inflation in May 2022 is at a whopping 15.8%. And, you know, frankly speaking, we are dependent on fertilizers, we are dependent on oil, the rupee dollar having, the rupee having weakened against the dollar, a certain amount of capital leaving India's equity markets, both in terms of FII as also in terms of probably the slowing down of FDI. I think all of those things are very, very important. I'm absolutely delighted that we have a fantastic panel of speakers who are here. And, the wonderful part is we have broken this up into two. The reigniting growth is one part, and the second part deals with social impact at the bottom of the pyramid. Under the president, Mr. Juzer Korakiwala, and the president-elect, Mr. Anand Singhania, IMC is very conscious that while we will do whatever is required to represent the interests of trade and industry, we will also have to keep in mind that the benefits of economic progress has to ultimately result in tangible changes that are being perceived by the man on the street, by the rural labor, by the urban poor. And I think it's very, very critical that we look at what is the social impact of whatever economic progress we are achieving. So in that context, the kind of panelists that we have, Juzer Bhai has already named them, but in our particular panel discussion, one which is on reigniting growth, we are going to have fantastic perspectives. Mr. Dharmakirti Joshi, one of India's foremost economists, chief economist of CRISIL, is going to give us a macro perspective on the economy, speak about some of the concerns of today, whether it be inflation, whether it be the dollars going back to a safe haven in the United States, implications in terms of availability of credit, and what happens in terms of, let us say, the government's subsidies and the fiscal deficit, the revenue deficit, etc. Thereafter, Mr. KVS Manian, President, Corporate Institutional Investment Banking, Kotak Bank, will give us a fantastic perspective on what's likely to happen in terms of credit availability, what is going to be the impact on micro, small, and medium enterprises, what is it that corporate India can do to kind of button down and overcome, see through this crisis, what roles banks are going to play to genuinely make a difference in these difficult and trying circumstances. Mr. A. Balasubramaniam, MD and CEO Aditya Birla Sun Life, will bring in a terrific perspective relating to the equity markets. I mean, having been part of Aditya Birla Capital for a long time and having a very strong background in research, he'll be able to tell us which sectors are going to drive the economic recovery, what needs to be done in terms of not being laggards, but trying to be the largest and the fastest growing economy in the world, maintain the position we achieved last year, and then also be in a position to focus a little bit more on the manufacturing sector, to tell us on manufacturing which are the sectors that are likely to do better. I've requested Mr. Manian to kind of focus a little bit more in terms of banking, financial services, and what's going to happen to lending and borrowing. Then we will have from the agriculture sector, Harjeev Singh Swani, Director Swani Spice Mills. He will be speaking to us about what's likely to happen in terms of the agri sector, what are the challenges, what can be done, do we need a green revolution, what do we need for better seeds, what do we need in terms of small parcels of land that are, that are 85% of the land surface that is being under irrigation, and 58% of people in India are dependent on that. So I think we have a star-studded panel. So without much ado, I am not going to share any wisdom. I'm now going to introduce our first speaker in the panel, Mr. Dharmakirti Joshi, Chief Economist, CRISIL. Clearly, Dharmakirti leads the economic research agenda and is the primary spokesperson of CRISIL on matters relating to macroeconomic issues. He has significant experience both in terms of macroeconomic analysis and medium-term assessments of the Indian economy. He has been a part of very important panels as an expert. He was on the working group of savings for the 12th five-year plan. He is currently on the working group on revision of wholesale price index set up by the government of India. He is co-chair of the economics group at FICCI. He has spent 33 years in economic research and consultancy. He has been a part of NCAER for 11 years. He has been part of the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, and then he's been part of CRISIL. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in economics. He has attended programs on macroeconomic policy and management at Harvard University, and he has been a visiting scholar, the Economic Research Unit of University of Pennsylvania. So I'm absolutely delighted to have all of you. Over to you, Dharmakirti. In case you would like to make a presentation, you can go ahead and project your slide. Kindly provide him the access.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramakrishnan, for inviting me and also for this very generous introduction. So I have a few slides. I thought I'll just bound myself with a few slides so that I don't, otherwise there's so much to talk about. So I hope it's visible on the screen, and let me, yeah.
Excellent.
All right. So I'll take a couple of minutes. I think please let me know, I think if I need to stop, but I'll try to abide by the timelines that you had set. So I think very clearly, as the chairman had pointed out, I think there are we've seen too many crises in the past. But I think COVID was in some sense, apart from being an economic crisis, also a humanitarian crisis. So it had completely different dimensions. Before it could end, I think we are plagued with geopolitical issues, which is, I think, stemming from Russia-Ukraine war. We're seeing crude prices go to very high levels and staying there. The US is raising interest rates, and I think now there is speculation that it might actually accelerate its pace of rate hikes. And then there is, of course, China. I think it was talking about the rise of China. I think right now China is slowing down. I think that itself is a concern for the world economy. So in the nutshell, I think the net impact of what's happening is we are getting higher inflation and we are getting lower growth. If the economy stagnates, then you reach a stagflationary situation, which could be a possibility in advanced countries, but not here. India is somewhat better positioned to weather the external shock, but it's not insulated. Rupee has weakened against the dollar, but I think if you look at other currencies, it's actually strengthened. I mean, so it's a mixed bag.
I think we've lost connectivity with Mr. Joshi.
I'll send him a text. I think he'll come back.
Yeah, he's there.
Dharmakirti, we lost you for about 30 seconds.
So let me switch my internet. Sorry, I think let me switch to another internet right now. Just give me 1 second, please.
It's fascinating.
Hello.
The wonders of modern technology.
Is that fine?
Yes.
Now it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I think I've keep the two switched on because I think you can't rely on one these days. So sorry about that. So I think growth, what I was mentioning is private consumption, which is about 55% of our GDP, is still a weak link. And then I think on the positive side for growth, the contact-based services, which were about 11% below their pre-pandemic level, even in 21-22, I think they are showing a very fast rebound. What I mean by that is your hospitality industry, where I think the contact is intensive and typically got hurt during the pandemic. I think that's rebounding. Inflation is a big issue. I'll come to that. We have a forecast of 6.8%, which is a little above what RBI has projected. In the midst of all this, I think the problem is that the ability of policy to support growth is reducing. I think so. Inflation is creating a challenge for monetary policy. So I think rising interest rates will at some point have an impact on the economy. Maybe not this year. It's a story for the next year. And then fiscal challenges, which I think I'll just speak about in a while, I think. So very quickly, the recovery is uneven. The point I want to highlight here is on the right-hand side, if you see, these are the components or the different parts of GDP. Your trade has done phenomenally well, I think, in last year. I think the exports and imports really did exceptionally well. government supported the economy through its consumption expenditure, which is GFC. So that I think grew at around 6.3%. Investment was not too bad, I mean, compared to private consumption, which was growing only at 1.4%. So overall GDP in 21-22 is 1.5% more than what it was in 2019-20. And what is trailing is the private consumption. Rest other parts are doing relatively well. Now, I think for sustained growth, you need investments to pick up, and you also need private consumption to pick up. Coming to inflation, I think a very 36,000 feet view on the inflation is that it's not that it's a new problem. I think it was gradually inching up. I mean, if you see 2020-21, it was largely food. I mean, food inflation was 7.3%. Your oil prices were very low, so no problem. Core inflation, which is overall inflation minus food, minus fuel, I think that was around 5.5%, but overall inflation was high at 6.2% because food has a very high weight. Next year, I think 21-22, food inflation came down. And I think the worry became fuel. The oil prices started rising even before the Russia conflict started. So that led to a very high fuel inflation in 21-22. And core inflation also started rising because as fuel prices rose, I think the companies were passing on the input costs. Now, as we move into 22-23, I think you'll see all the elements being read. I think it's not localized anymore. It's generalized now. So we have food inflation, which is rising because of international prices. Input costs for agriculture are rising. Freak weather is playing a very big role. I think it's become very unpredictable now. The input price increases, which Mr. Ramakrishnan was talking about, wholesale price index rising at 15%. So that reflects the input costs for the system. Now that is not completely passed on. Yet I think it is whatever is passed on is leading to higher inflation than central bank would like to tolerate. So clearly, I think there is a worry, and this is precisely because of this worry that the central bank started its actions on very fast interest rate hikes or front-loaded. Now people say that, well, can it control food inflation? Can it control fuel inflation? Well, in India, I think unlike in US, where the inflation control is primarily the job of the central bank, you don't hear of subsidies and other things there. I think in India, it's a three-pronged approach. Central bank is the first line of defense. So it is raising interest rates. The second line of defense is from the fiscal authorities, where I think they are trying to reduce inflation pressure from the bottom, from where it originates, which is the wholesale. So they have cut the duties, I mean, on imports and also on some of the domestic products. And the third part of inflation management is the addressing the problems of the vulnerable sections, which are facing inflation heat more than the higher income brackets, because they depend more on fuel and food. So so government has to roll out subsidies. So I think it's not RBI doing alone. It's number of bodies coming together. The role of RBI is to ensure that food and fuel inflation, which it cannot control, doesn't pass on to the rest of the economy. So it has to slow down the economy. That's how it controls inflation. The good news is it's not going to slow down the economy this year. It's going to happen towards the last quarter of this year, because 3 to 4 quarters is the lag between what central bank does today and its impact on GDP and on inflation. So I think I want to just wind up by talking a little bit about how the government priority has changed during this entire period. Last year's fiscal deficit was 6.9%. It is re-estimated at 6.7. Government wants to bring it down. The strategy was that they will cut all the subsidies which were introduced to fight the pandemic. But unfortunately, because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the inflation started rising, and the government had to cut excise duties and many other things. So its spends, which it wanted to reduce, I think has bloated even more. So now what it means is that one critical way in which they could have brought down the deficit is not going to function. So now they have to depend on either cutting capital expenditure to make way for subsidies, or they will have to live with higher borrowings. I mean, so it's a Hobson's choice. It's a difficult choice. So the point I'm making is that with very little leverage, I think the government has to now manage inflation. It has to support the economy, because cutting investments would mean reducing your potential rate of growth for the future. So it's a tough situation we are in, but despite all this, I think India's GDP growth is still projected to be among the highest in the world in terms of just the momentum this year. And inflation pressures are, of course, there. Everyone is facing them, but we are fighting it in our own way. So let me stop there. I think I might have taken a little more time than.
So Dharmakirti, that was absolutely wonderful. I think now it's my pleasure to bring into the discussion Mr. KVS Manian. Mr. KVS Manian is President, Corporate, Institutional and Investment Banking at Kotak Mahindra Bank. As the leader there since 2014, Mr. Manian also oversees the firm's institutional equities business. Throughout his 27 years with the group, he has been instrumental in setting up and metamorphosing many business divisions into significant success stories. Mr. Manian played a crucial role in Kotak's journey from an NBFC to a bank, and what a successful bank has been created. The end-to-end execution of the project within the planned time frame is testimony to Mr. Manian's ability to focus on every small detail without losing sight of the big picture, and his amazing team building, leadership, and interpersonal abilities. He has a fantastic strategic vision, and he combines it with high energy and a bias for action, style, and execution in every business that he manages. Very clearly today, Kotak is a very high quality corporate franchise, which integrates corporate and investment banking solutions. Mr. Manian is an electrical engineer from IIT BHU Varanasi, a postgraduate in financial management from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, and a cost and works accountant. He has 30 years of rich experience across investment banking, corporate banking, consumer banking, financial accounting and control, management accounting, project management, and operations. Very clearly, apart from this, Mr. Manian has his heart in the right place. He has been acknowledged as the highest individual pledge raiser in the corporate challenge category by United Way of Mumbai at the Mumbai Marathon for 2 years in a row, 2014 and 2015. Over to you, Mr. Manian. We are all ears and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ram, for the splendid introduction. Coming to the topic of the day, just to first give a perspective of the situation from the banking, credit, that perspective, as you mentioned earlier. So if you really look at, there are certain things that are well aligned. While of course, Dharmakirti also talked about somewhat darker clouds on the inflation, FII flows, oil prices, rupee weakness and geopolitical issues and all that. The good part, I would say, is that banking system overall, I think, is fairly well positioned in terms of its asset quality, because if you recall the GFC time, banks went through really bad times in terms of their asset quality, and the corporate lending of most banks was in real trouble. Banks had serious asset quality issues. So also did the MSME and all that lending, and at that time even the retail lending side was looking very weak in terms of asset quality. So the good news is banks are fairly well placed, low NPAs, good asset quality, reasonably well capitalized. Even NBFC sector is fairly well capitalized. PSU banks have got consolidated into stronger entities. General liquidity in the banking system is still reasonable. So I would say the ability of banking and non-banking finance companies, the whole system is quite good in terms of ability to lend today. So which is the good story. Now come to the other side, the borrower side. Actually, even if you look at the corporate balance sheets today, they are significantly better off than they were, say, 3 to 4 years back. Significant deleveraging has happened on the corporate balance sheet. There is cash sitting on most companies' balance sheets. So the liquidity in the corporates is also quite good. Most of them have worked very significantly on their efficiency parameters, whether it is working capital management efficiency, cost efficiencies. In fact, pandemic drove that kind of a campaign amongst corporates. So basically, given all that, their position to actually invest and going forward, put in capital expenditures is also significant. And given the fact that I think capacity utilizations have moved closer to 70s, mid 70s, I know pre-pandemic, we used to talk about 60, 65% kind of capacity utilizations. Today, we are talking about 75% capacity utilization. So my belief is that many corporates will have started beginning to believe that it is time to invest, because they are also reaching typically 80% capacity utilization is time when corporates really start investing. So both from corporate point of view, it seems like right time for them to invest. And from the bank's point of view, ability to lend exists. So, in some ways, it looks like the stars are well aligned. Having said that, the fact is, as on today, if you look at the numbers, the large part of the credit growth is still driven by retail and personal kind of borrowings. Of late, if you look at the data, large part of it has been driven by home loans and things like that, not necessarily corporate lending. So are we already there? I don't think we are there. I think there is some element of confidence building that is required for private investment to begin, because this turnaround and this growth cycle is not going to happen unless we get private investment to come in. While the government has been trying and doing infrastructure-led investment into the economy, Mr. Dharmakirti also mentioned that the wiggle room on the fiscal is getting tougher and tougher, and therefore that cannot be the prime mover of the growth from here, and therefore private investment is critical. In fact, even pre-pandemic, if you recall, there were a few years we had got into growth being primarily led by private consumption, not even by private investment. So I think that shift to private investment is key to move from here. And I do not actually believe, while we talked about interest rates looking up and inflation being high, and therefore interest rates will look up from here. I do not actually believe that slightly higher interest rates are a dampener on investment. Actually, if you go back and look at the period from 2003 to 2008, actually the interest rates were rising and growth was happening and credit growth was happening, right? And you go back to post 2014, we have had a downward interest cycle, yet growth has been weaker and credit growth has been even weaker. So actually there is no evidence in my mind to that there is correlation between interest rates and credit growth and GDP growth. So I think the thing is to build confidence just now. And of course, we will talk more about, I will come to it in later part of the discussion. But I think the idea is to just now we must make policy measures and build confidence in a way that private investment comes back. And that is key to getting back growth in my mind.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manian. That was so clear and lucid. My pleasure now to introduce Mr. A. Balasubramaniam, Bala to all of us. I'm very happy to say that a trip abroad to the US came up. For very pleasant reasons, his daughter has got an amazing internship at a postgrad level in medicine in an amazing university in Philadelphia. And Bala had to go there. But the good news is, if he was in India, we could not have caught him. But he's there up at 5:30 a.m. In the USA, and he's attending our panel discussion. So Bala, sincere thanks and thank you so much. Bala has been a part of Aditya Birla Group since 1994. He has 28 years of experience in the mutual fund industry, both as a portfolio manager in fixed income as well as the equity side. Prior to assuming the role of the CEO in 2009, Bala served as the Chief Investment Officer from 2006 to 2009. As MD and CEO, Bala oversees USD $36 billion of assets under management. This would have only grown significantly. This data is a little dated. And he also oversees global mandates. And through the subsidiary companies in Singapore and Dubai, there is another $2 billion, apart from seeing alternate investment funds, real estate funds, and PMS. Bala plays important role in key industry bodies. He's on the board of governors of National Institute of Securities Markets. He's also on the SEBI committee on corporate bond market development. And he also plays an active role in AMFI as a board of director. He has also held the position of chairman of AMFI for 2 years, 2016 to 18. He has done his BSc in mathematics and an MBA. He is also an alumnus of IIM Bangalore and HBS through the Advanced Management Program. Bala, over to you. I look forward to your perspective on, the capital markets have a way of looking into the future. So you are the one with the crystal glass. So why don't you tell us what you see?
Yeah, thanks Ramki for the nice introduction. Of course, currently I'm serving as AMFI chairman as well for the second term. Just to ensure that our own experience is not just being utilized only for our own company, it's also being utilized as you have been serving IMC. We also work for the industry benefit. Very quickly, take on from Manian and Dharmakirti Joshi. Clearly, from the economy point of view, yes, this is a challenging time. While there's a challenging time arising on account of the global uncertainty, mainly leading to high inflation and lower growth, I think we are living in the fear of a stagflation kind of model. There's absolutely no doubt on that. But having said that, the expectation of the market versus the policymakers, I think for the first time ever, I'm saying my own lifetime of being part of the capital market for the last 30 years, the market has been discounting the worst in terms of rate hike. And nobody even talks about less than, say, 70 basis point rate hike when the regulator thinks about 50 basis point rate hike. I think the market is pushing them very aggressively. Even as recent as last week RBI policy, though the RBI took on the hike of about 50 basis points, the markets were expecting one day before 70 basis point rate hike will come, and therefore the market was adjusting itself to the substantial hike in the rates. The way actually I look at this is the bond market I divided into two parts. One is what is the current market trend, and second is what is the future talks about. The future talks about a substantial rise in interest rates. That's where the market is pricing in. So that's one good thing which I'm saying, the disconnect between the market versus the regulator. The second is, as we can probably say with some bit of confidence, while the current rise in inflation is led by supply chain issues, thanks to mainly because of the Ukraine-Russia war. At the same time, whether one can take this as a temporary or a sustained low inflation remain in US for many number of years, whether the adjustment factor is happening. I think these two things have to be, of course, looked at it from the broader perspectives. Coming to the fundamentals of the Indian economy, there's one fundamental factor that I think drives the Indian market, as Manian mentioned about it. Credit growth in the market is, though it is low, high interest rates is actually not a dampening factor from the growth point of view. And that's something has come on the back of the pandemic. The interest rate is now divided into two parts. One is the borrowing for the government has become costly because of high fiscal. At the same time, borrowing for the corporates, borrowing for the individuals are remain cheap. And the spreads between the government securities bonds and the corporate bond spreads is very, very low. Even today, access for money from the banking system point of view to low and the cheaper rate of interest remains very, very high. The way I would probably define the cost of capital for Indian corporates point of view used to be one of the highest determining factor to undertake any kind of manufacturing activities. Unfortunately, today the interest rates are being slow and spreads are being low. Clearly, I think the cost of capital for companies are the lowest. In fact, in the last 1.5 years, Indian companies have become much more stronger than ever in the past, mainly because of high liquidity, high prices have made the balance sheet got completely changed. Therefore, the number of companies sitting on cash is far higher than actually the borrowing. Even the metal companies who are generally used to borrow and make investments, clearly they are sitting on a cash surplus. In fact, the last 1 year, the number of companies would have repaid their past loans, even if they were cheap in nature, I think it's been very, very high, given the fact that most of the companies have become more debt averse and they all have been managed to raise money in the form of equity. Therefore, now they are becoming stronger from the point of view of investment. So that's one fundamental change that has come from the capital market point of view. Second is the companies' reward for the shareholders as a result of this have also been rising because of a high ROE and low investment, low cash flows in the bank, the balance sheet definitely improves the ROA and ROA that also has come. Specific to the various sectors, clearly, I think as a result of this, I think India has been having a two-pronged approach. The major capex in the country are being undertaken by public sector companies. Unlike the past, the government of India used to, of course, go with some bit of hesitation in terms of increasing the spending. Clearly, the last few years under the current government regime, there has been a significant push that's being given on infrastructure road building through the NHIs, as well as the MAR through the Bharat Mala. And third is, of course, in terms of spending money on the railway modernization. There has been a significant amount of investment that is being made by government of India. And for third, of course, in the power sector reforms has been a continuous process. And the new way of India, the digitalization of India has also been investing huge amount of money on the service sectors. The major component of India fortune is now driven by the government themselves, both the central government and the state government and the municipalities and the panchayat unions. I think all the four components of the drivers of economic growth is being driven by the public sector. Unlike the past where the private sector investments used to determine the GDP growth, this time has been completely shifted towards the public sectors. Therefore, the manufacturing sectors, while you may probably argue that one may argue that private sector investments in capex is very, very low, but major portion of the capex is being taken over by the government of India and related government entities. That's a big fundamental shift has happened. Second, from the private sector point of view, since the time the performance-linked incentive schemes were introduced, I think the number of companies who have applied for licenses have been growing. The number of state governments who have been actually active in luring investment opportunities in India have also been rising. As a result of that, the significant project that has been announced post China slowing down about 4 years back, the number of people who chose between Taiwan and India have also been on the rise. As a result of that, today we can take pride. Some of these mobile phones are being used actually in the overseas market, sold in the overseas market. They can probably ship from India, such as Apple, Samsung. They all have a good amount of shipment that is happening from India by manufacturing in India. I think they exported to overseas market. There also has been the new trend that is being seen. Right now, though he's not talking about, he's not making a headline. I think clearly we are making a progress on the space. Second, at the manufacturing side, there is a clear progress that's been happening on the electric vehicles and the manufacturing sectors. There is one fundamental shift is happening because of the low interest rate. The last 3 years of poor consumption and spending by the Indian consumers, and I have seen the auto sector have seen a significant degrowth the last few years. But having said that, given the fact that the road connectivity, the government push in terms of getting back in economic growth has now become real. Clearly, we are seeing a significant demand pickup coming in auto sector. First time ever, I am seeing in the country, there are certain vehicles which are manufactured by, introduced by, let us take Mahindra, or even Tata Motors for the matter. Now they have got a waiting period of ranging from 3 months to as 1 year. The recent vehicle is launched by Mahindra Group has waiting period of 1 year. I don't think we ever heard in the history of the Indian economy, and that's been in the last 10 years. I think we used to hear about the waiting period way back in 90s. But that again something has come because there has been a demand has come for some of the new vehicle is also being produced by Mahindra. The same way, the companies who actually have gone a little ahead of the curve in terms of setting up the manufacturing preparedness, such as electric vehicles coming from Tata Motors. I've got a 1 month of waiting period. They're able to supply as much as they want. There is a bit of disconnect. There is a certain segment there has been a waiting period. There is a certain segment actually the waiting period is just for as low as 1 month. And that's the case with most of the passenger vehicles in the country, whether it is a car or passenger vehicles. is now happening, not making headline, given the fact that this is something is, I think, going unnoticed. Second, of course, is the commercial vehicles after seeing almost 2 years of 2-3 years of dull period because of the increase in freight rates. Of course, and naturally inflation pushes up the freight rates. At the same time, moments of goods also now beginning to pick up. Clearly, the freight rates going up is leading to improvement in the commercial vehicle activities as well. There are other manufacturing sectors, auto ancillaries, and given the fact that last 2 years of pandemic did not have movement of vehicles, I think auto ancillaries as a space is also now picking up. Therefore, there is significant focus coming on auto as a sector. The second, of course, in the manufacturing sectors, thanks to the withdrawal of the manufacturing, both by most of the European countries as well as China a few years back, mainly in the chemical areas, specialty chemicals, as well as the chemical that's being used in textiles and other segment. There has been a significant shift that has happened towards India. There also is something as a global supply chain is being taken over by India, both on this the segment as well as on the capex side. I think global capex, as it starts picking up, definitely Indian companies are much more prepared. And the third, I think, is it's again coming related to the railways, related to the government spending in terms of infrastructure, related to the automation work that has been picked up, especially in the auto sectors. Clearly, the capex goods sectors, which has again seen a languishing behavior for a number of years, also now is coming in the radar, which again reflects the order book position that is coming in. We take the company like Siemens and ABB or Alstom Power, all these companies have now got a decent order book position, which means that these companies are actually now beginning to see their fortune coming back. The last but not the least is the one segment where there has been a significant progress from a very high capacity, low pricing power, and input cost has been high, especially the power sectors. I think we probably were a bit ahead of the curve. Started the power sector reforms way back in 2012, and that sector actually undergone a major ups and downs the last few years, especially in the last 10 years. But especially the last few years, have gone through such a restructuring process. Clearly, the power sector as a one sector is becoming one of the big focus areas. And this sector, actually, the government of India has taken a huge initiatives in introducing a smart meter. I'm told 30 crore smart meters will have to be produced in India to give to the households in order to ensure that one CPH system comes down in terms of power seepage and power theft comes down. And the compliance towards making the bill payment, as it has happened in the case of Revolution, in the fast track mechanism, especially in the toll roadways where it's happened. Clearly, I think the same thing seems to be happening on the power sector by way of introducing smart meters and household. It's only a question of time for the next 2-3 years. Once the smart meters becomes a compulsory in every household to be used, then you can imagine actually what the kind of the manufacturing sectors can get a flip as a result of this. And power sector, if undergoes a major change, power availability improves, price remains constant, at the same time compliance improves this. As a result of that, overall, the government of India is able to get what is there due to them. At the same time, gives power availability to the industrial sectors for them to actually look at the future growth. Clearly, the many areas, I think there are progress is happening. No doubt, I think the current challenging environment globally does have an impact, given the fact that the money flow remains constant from overseas investment point of view. As we see actually pressure coming in the US market, definitely India also has got the pressure on the same line. But fundamentally, I think India probably will remain disconnected from the global market as we progress, because one, fiscal wild is a concern. I think the broad credit market continues to remain somewhat funded by the equity. Therefore, unlike the past, I think pressure in the banking system is not going to be very high. At the same time, forex reserves is so sufficient, and the Reserve Bank of India also has been so proactive, and they will also ensure the growth doesn't get affected as we get a first opportunity for them to actually take a lead in the global space. I'll stop here. I'm sure more discussion could happen during the Q&A sections.
Bala, if the RBI governor, the finance minister, and the prime minister were listening to you speak, they will be feeling very happy with the optimism and confidence. And I really appreciate your backing what you're saying with strong data, and really appreciate that. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Mr. Harjeev Sawhney. Harjeev runs a company that is very young. It's only about 150 years young. Sawhney Spices has been there, and probably he's the 7th generation in Swanee Spices. Harjeev's technological passion has led him to implement projects for plant design, mechanics, process automation, and technology successfully. His passion keeps Swanee Spice way ahead in the processing space. His focus on research, looking out for new technologies in flavor and color retention, which is the true essence of spice. And I'm really hoping that he will spice up our discussions today. Automation, using the latest technology, new projects, and capacity expansion, and ensuring that the plants maintain their commitment towards the sustainable journey are some of the things Harjeev drives passionately. There is a terrific achievement. His excellence and that of his team, they have become certified lead auditors by DNV for British retail consumption in 2014. His team implements and maintains the various certifications of the company. Harjeev is an engineer in industrial production and management. He has done the owners and presidents management program at HBS. So we have at least 2 Harvard alumni who are sitting here, and delighted, Harjeev. Looking forward to hearing from you, the voice from the heart of India.
Thank you, sir. It's always wonderful when somebody else introduces you. It just feels much better. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the agri sector in India. The agri sector has always been the slowest growing sector in our space, in all the conversations that we've heard. The agri sector has only grown about 11% in the last 14 years. But the agri sector also contributes to 20% of India's GDP. So last year has actually been, or the last 2 years have been the best growth years for the agri sector, which grew between 3.9 to 4%, which is a lot. Now, again, in 58% of India's population works with agriculture in some form or the other, versus 67%, which is the global average in agriculture. Well, you know, India itself exports almost about, the exports from India have really increased by 20%, which is almost $50 billion in 21-22 in the agri sector. But some of the largest challenges that we really face in India is that we have major constraints, which is your small and fragmented landowners. We have marginal stakeholders or landholders. 60% of them hold less than 1 acre, or sorry, 1 hectare. 20% is what we call the small holders, which have 1 to 2 hectares on which they have to look after their complete families. Now, one of the main things that India needs to do is encourage more corporates to get into community farming or corporate farming. And here what we need to do is largely start working with villages to expand production. The small marginal holders really don't have the means, capability, and ability to grow better products or to increase the yields. So what we really need is to take complete ecosystems, like adopt complete villages in the agri sector, and then literally take them under your wing and help them farm better. In India, what we need is we need better seeds. We need to increase output. We need to increase yields. And this is where we need help from the government side to kind of subsidize high yielding seeds to small and marginal farmers to increase their growth perspectives. You know, then precision farming is something that India really needs to look into. We need to start bringing in newer technologies as far as farming is concerned. If you look at countries like Israel, they've been completely landlocked and being largely desert. They really have exploded as far as the agri sector is concerned. We need to encourage more and more farmers to go into multi-cropping, irrigation. And fortunately, there is a lot of funding available now through the banks to encourage farmers to also go into more mechanized ways of farming, to get into drip irrigation, to get into sprinkler irrigation, and so on. One of the biggest advantages, or one of the big things that we really like to see in the agri sector, which is like a wish list literally, is to make sure that the mandis literally go cashless, where like we've seen in like the MSP implementation in Punjab and Haryana, where the farmers submit their crop to the government under the MSP scheme, and the money literally goes straight to their bank accounts. Currently, what's happening in the agri sector is that there is a lot of money sharks or loan sharks, if you want to call it. Most of the farmers in India are under debt traps, whether they owe money to the artiyas or the fertilizer shops or the seed shops. They're always perpetually in debt. This is when a strong banking sector can come in and say, if you're giving the product to the corporate sector or to the government sector, the cash goes straight to your bank account. Through your bank account, the banking system can really help you borrow money at lower interest rates and get out of the hands of loan sharks. Now, this on the other side, what happens is the banks can then tie up with the government to ensure that the farmers get an insurance on their crop, which a lot of farmers in India don't take insurances on their crop, which again will boost the sales of lending to farmers. Your insurance sector also gets a boost. And what do? We really protect a small marginal farmer. We're seeing how weather is changing throughout the world. It's not just in India. We're seeing weather variances happening in almost each and every country around the world. How do we protect the small marginal farmer? It's by making sure that they get insurance. The bank can cross-sell them the insurance when they're giving them the loans, or a part of the loan signing document could be an insurance against their crop. So there is really a huge opportunity for the corporate world to get into community type farming and help grow this sector. Because literally at the end of the conference today, 3-4 hours later, everybody's going to get hungry. And who's going to put food on the table? So I'm trying to be as short as possible.
Thank you, Harjeev. Anything else you would like to add?
That's it for now. I'm sure more and more points will come up.
Excellent.
During our discussion.
Excellent. So I think with these thoughts, let's just move on to a panel discussion. I would like to engage in a kind of a conversation, throw up some questions which multiple panel members can address. Dharmakirti, the optimism that Bala reflected, which parts of that you agree with and which parts you would exercise a little caution?
Well, it's an uncertain environment, I think, for sure. And so how things will play out, I think you look at anything, that we predicted 3 months back and what happened actually. Inflation, even the central bank was expecting at 4.5% in February. And now they've changed it to 6.7%. It's a world of difference. So in this environment, there's nothing that is going to be linear. So I think that is number one. So, but overall, I think I would say I share the optimism. I have made some notes. I think I share the optimism on the auto sector because the auto sector, particularly the upper end, I think there's been a major shift in the auto demand. The smaller cars, the two-wheelers, I think their demand is still depressed. I think that's a result of K-shape in the economy. Whereas the upper segment of auto, I think is doing extremely well. I think that's because the incomes there have risen. So there is a very clear dichotomy. So overall auto might look reasonably good, but there is within that, the picture is not uniform. So that's what I said. There's going to be non-linearity in everything. And auto is a very clear example of that, but auto prospects are, I think, are much better. I think if India is going to grow fast, I think the roads are being built, highways are being built. All those things are very positive for auto, except possibly the fuel, which is a dampening factor from a medium to long-term perspective. On the investment side, I think I agree that we have also done work on the PLI scheme, and PLI scheme is indeed quite is yet to yield results. It will yield results from 2023 to 26, so it's a medium-term play. The good thing about this scheme is it is an output-based scheme. So I think so if you want to take benefit from this, you'll have to very quickly invest. So it forces the entities to invest, front load their investments. So that is one part I think which is positive. On the sectors which are primed up, I completely agree that I think Mr. Manian had also said. I think CRISIL ratings show that the upgrades are 5 times the downgrade. So for every one downgrade in the economy, the 5 companies are getting upgraded, and this is largely because I think the mid to the large parts of the corporate sector have consolidated. Their financial profile has improved, their leverage has reduced, so they are in a position to leverage themselves if they want to go in for aggressive investment. So that capability does exist. Capacity utilization is particularly in the sectors like steel, metal, etc. For auto sector, by the way, capacity utilization is still low, I think, for many segments. The other part of the story, I think, which is continuously going to play out is the greening of investments. I think the EV, solar, the battery infrastructure, charging infrastructure, all these things are going to continue to the investments in them will continue. I mean, and government's ability to invest, I think, partly hinges on how much fiscal space they have, because in this budget, government had made a tilt towards not leveraging the PSUs, etc., not letting them go to the market, rather give the money directly through the budget. I mean, so they wanted to reduce the off-budget borrowing. So it critically hinges on how much money government is able to generate from the budget side. So I think I'm positive on the investments. I think for the last 8 to 9 years, I think we've been talking about investment upturn. That has not happened. I mean, so this is, I think, probably one time where I think a mix of once we get out of this uncertainty, I agree. I think
kindly mute yourself, except the panelists.
Very quickly, the last point, the interest rates are not going to come in the way of investments. I completely agree with that. But the uncertainty can come in the way of investments. I think that is the biggest. So the corporates, despite having the capability to invest, I think will try to wait and watch. The period which Mr. Bala was referring to after the global financial crisis, when investments were booming, I think that also led to overinvestments. I think people invested more than that was required, and the subsequent slowdown in the economy, actually those many of those turned into NPAs, etc. We don't have that kind of a scenario right now. The NPA pressure is not in the larger companies, unlike the previous cycle. It is more in the small, medium enterprise companies, which have been hit much harder by the pandemic. And because of the moratorium, the numbers look comfortable right now. But at some point, I think they will start going up. But the large and the mid-sized companies are doing well. So it's an interesting story that is playing out. It's not a uniform story. It's got many shades to it.
Wonderful. Mr. Manian, taking a cue from what Dharmakirti said, Mr. Manian, do you have any light in front of you? Because there isn't enough light falling on your face. Is there any possibility? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't make it better than this. Sorry.
Fine. No, because I am from the lighting world, having been in Bajaj Electricals and Polycab. So
right.
That's why I'm a little conscious. Okay. So we'll have to come and fix the lighting in your office.
Yeah, I know. I think there is a way to fix the lighting in my office. Then. Yeah.
Mr. Manian, my question has to do with micro, small, and medium enterprises. How do you see them in the context of whatever is happening? You see, COVID really impacted the MSME adversely. I mean, they had to pay the employee bill. They were not having business. They were having a cash crunch, and they just about were limping back. And then again, all this has happened relating to inflation, increase in rates, tightening up of the credit, not to mention potentially another wave of COVID, which may have, we don't know. That is still an uncertainty. It has impacted, I mean, today, China, whatever we are seeing, whether it be Beijing, Shanghai, they are reeling with the problem. And we really don't know what is the message that's coming out of China at any point in time. What do you have to say, sir, for MSMEs?
No, you are right. I think the sector was significantly impacted by pandemic. But just let me take you back to pre-pandemic days as well. MSME sector. Dharmakirti will tell you that even CRISIL data on MSME sector, if you look at even pre-pandemic times, the NPA levels have been of the order of 11-12%, 10-12% at all times, right? And those are very, very high levels, right? So obviously, therefore, bankers have been always relatively cautious. I know in forums talks happen about easing flows into that sector. But the fact is, bankers have been cautious around that sector, primarily because the NPA levels are really high, right? 10-12%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dharmakirti, you would know this data more than I know. And pandemic times, of course, they were impacted. But having said that, the government support scheme, the ECLGS scheme, the moratorium, RBI scheme on moratorium, the ECLGS scheme of the government, which essentially made more funding available, duly guaranteed by the government, was a great help to this sector. And like Dharmakirti just mentioned, part of the reason was, of course, the moratorium, but part of the reason was also these ECLGS schemes, which have helped this segment remain afloat and bankers to manage the credit quality of this portfolio. And, usually the MSME health, the health of this sector is an outcome of the health of the Gangotri, right? Because most of them are in the supply chains, and the health of the top corporates flows down to the MSME segment. So we just talked about the health of the corporates above seems better. So they pay their vendors in time and things like that. Therefore, I would say that it's a mixed bag. Yes, pandemic has impacted this more. But also the fact that the health of the top-end corporates is better is a good sign going forward for this segment. And I can tell you that we are already beginning to see several sectors within MSME, like the specialty chemicals, people who work on projects, logistics, construction, auto ancillaries. So there are several sectors within MSME where we are already beginning to see people putting up capacity. Of course, textile does its volatile act once in a while. Textile looked good a while back. Of course, now again cotton prices have risen, and some parts of textile looks not so healthy. But even in the MSME sector, we are seeing signs of improvement in the sector. But I can tell you one thing, that most banks, you talk to most progressive banks today, whether it's, I'm not only talking of Kotak Mahindra Bank, most progressive banks you talk about, all of them, and we included, have extremely high focus on this segment. All of us want to grow this segment faster than, let's say, the rest of the corporate portfolio. I can tell you that Kotak Bank's strategy is to grow the MSME sector faster than the pure corporate lending segment, because we believe it is a lucrative segment as long as we make the right choices. So I don't think good MSMEs, well-managed MSMEs, who, of course, each MSME in this world has to look through their strategy. There are businesses which may have, got destroyed. The business models need to be relooked at. Their distribution mechanisms have to change. Their focus on what sells, how branding makes a huge difference. Many of them have to align to bigger brands so that they can be at the back end, because they can't spend on brands. There are strategies that MSMEs have to think about also. And I think it is an evolving scenario. All I would say is the success of MSME as a sector is very critical to the success of India and Indian economy, right? So,
I see what you're saying is music to our ears, because very clearly, if we can upgrade micros to small, small to medium, and absolutely, medium to large, I think in terms of India's continuum, in terms of the development and growth path, hitting a 10% GDP growth would be feasible.
Yes.
Bala, I will now turn to you. Bala, my question to you has to do with rising commodity prices, rising freight costs. You know what's happened to container pricing when it comes to imports, the rupee dollar, and its implications in terms of the $500 billion of imports that India has, etc. I just want to ask you, what is likely to happen to corporate profitability? What is likely? Of course, the markets have tempered, but at the very same time, the pressure to perform is definitely there. But if margins are going to be shrinking, what is likely to happen? And in fact, there is a question in the chat box addressed specifically for you. What is the reason for the crash in global and Indian stock markets? I am told there is only one person who knows it. That person is Bala. I hope you fix it when you go there to the US.
I think what you said is right. One, from the metal perspective, I call it as a global cyclicals. Global cyclicals had huge run the last few years in terms of price. Therefore, they could make substantial margin. Some of the companies for March ending quarter, or not March ending quarter, December quarter last year, they report the highest ever profit in their lifetime in terms of the EBITDA profit. Most of the metal companies reported highest ever profit. And most of the companies, as a result of this, as I mentioned in my opening remark, also use the cash rather than using it for capex and build their future on the base of the current price prevailing. They chose actually to make the balance sheet more stronger. So that's the fundamental shift that happened. But having said that, the input cost has been rising for most of the companies, mainly led by coal prices going up. And second is energy cost has been rising globally. Of course, India has not seen a similar energy cost rise. Therefore, they got relatively safe. But however, the coal prices going up has increased the energy cost for most of the commodities companies. And this actually impacted the profitability and likely to keep the profitability relatively somewhat low. On top of it, the government of India has also taken steps despite having a pressure from corporate world. They chose to actually introduce export duty tax as well as import duty restrictions. And those are actually have impacted the prices coming down. Therefore, is likely to impact the prices of the metal prices, as well as the profitability of some of the companies in the global cyclical space, at least for next 1 or 2 quarters, if not more. I think fundamentally, these sectors are getting into the longer term bull market. For next 10 years, will probably metal as the sectors continue to do well, not because of anything else. I think as the global market turns into a somewhat vicious circle on investment led growth coming back, and this company will get to benefit. That's why I think metal as a sectors clearly are in a 10-year kind of bull market, but I think they are in a cyclical downturn at this point of time. But at the same time, the company's balance sheet are much stronger, therefore ability to absorb the shock is relatively higher. At the same time, the FMG companies also have gone through the same inflation-led prices because prices are not able, they're not able to increase the prices. In fact, globally, I read a story that companies like Apple do not want to increase the prices of mobile phone. At the same time, they don't want to take too much of input cost increasing. Therefore, increase the prices will become real. But they have undertaken not to increase the prices. Therefore, to the extent the profitability of the companies would remain somewhat weak. And this is a cycle in which I see most of the companies go through. Second is most of the companies will also be more governed by the fairness from the consumer point of view. Will they actually try to increase the prices, therefore they making too much of money? Or having made too much of money, they will actually live with the lower profit, lower margin. At the same time, the output prices do not increase significantly. Probably I would assume most of the companies who are more focused on governance, fairness, they'll also choose this path. Like Hindustan Lever have chosen the path not to increase the price significantly. Some other companies like B2C segment, they have increased the prices, but not in the B2B segment. They're not in luxury of increasing the price on B2B segment, given the fact that both the businesses are actually undergoing a pressure, like auto sectors are not in a position to increase the pine prices to auto manufacturing companies. At the same time, they are in a position to increase the prices for the general consumers, the retail level. I think we are seeing a mixed reaction. Therefore, the corporate profit is going to remain somewhat weak. But I think the global market crash, I think, is largely on account of 2 things. One, of course, excess valuation that got set in the last few years, that's getting corrected. And second is expected profitability impact on most of the companies also reflecting. And some bit of, I would say, there's too much of money that was chasing companies globally, especially the leverage trades that normally happens in the low interest rate environment. with interest rate rising, definitely I think leverage also is going away. The last but not least, the fact, I think it will divide the market valuation in two parts, earnings yields versus the bond yields. And today with the expected profitability degrowth coming in the next few quarters, and the earnings yields of companies have, of course, have also come off compared to the bond yields. I think if you take US 3.3% on 10-year bond yields, 3.4 or 3 on 10-year bond yields versus the earnings yield of 4%, which used to be the earnings yield between the bond yields used to be almost about 4% in global market, in US especially. That's why most of the money were coming actually to the equity market rather than going to the bond market. But in India, if you look at it, we still earnings yields about 4.5%, whereas the bond yield is close to about 8%. Therefore, India still we are fairness in terms of the gap between the earnings and bond yields. Whereas the US actually is narrowing. That's the reason, one of the reason they are seeing a big sell-off coming from as part of the asset allocation. I think we are in that drive in terms of asset allocation moving more towards fixed income instruments, whereas in equity, purely on the basis of the earnings yield versus the bond yields differential, which probably I would say is an adjustment factor rather than anything else.
Thank you so much. Harjeev, there have been some interesting questions specifically aimed at you. I'll read one of the questions, which is, there is scope for non-traditional approach to promote low-cost indigenous products catalyzed by crop insurance companies, creating a win-win situation. Traditional approach has limitations due to weather uncertainty, and so with community farming. Can you comment upon it, please? Thank you so much for giving the reply in the chat box, but it will be useful to hear your views.
Sure, sir. The main thing is about that we need to be able to go down and come out of the conference rooms and go down into the farms and really help teach farmers about sustainable farming. You know, the human population is actually exploding. Farmland is not increasing. So the only option is to be able to get higher yields per acre or per hectare of farmland that's there. Now, when we look at the India statistics, I mean, 55% of Indian fields are really rain-fed. What is the next option? The next option is to go down into water tables. So what we really need to do is develop new and new technologies, help these farmers get access to these technologies where we can use underground water in a very conscientious way, save as much water as possible, and irrigate the fields. And at the same time, whenever possible, also recharge underground tables by using rainwater harvesting techniques. That's one option. The second option is to migrate a lot of these farmers to sprinkler irrigations, to micro irrigation. I'm sorry, I'm coming down to like very, very micro points, because what we strongly believe is that a small growth in the agri sector contributes to a very large GDP growth to our country. You know, controlling food inflation is probably one of the first steps for everybody for the start, because GDP, again, you know, we constantly hearing about inflation going up. Oil is not in our control. India imports a lot of oil. The only thing that is in our hands is that India is a massive agri economy. That is in our hands. That is something that we can take control of, and that is what we can do to help. That's what corporate, all of us in this boardroom can do to help.
Thank you. Dharmakirti, I'm curious about what's likely to happen in terms of, let us say, the startup sector. You know, in recent times, and I would like Mr. Manian also to comment upon it, in recent times, in terms of, I mean, of course, we have 101 unicorns out of India at this point in time. But of late, in terms of the quantum of investments, the time taken for decision making, etc., we are finding that there is a little bit of a deceleration in the enthusiasm. I would just like your views, Dharmakirti, and also of Mr. Manian. What do you see happening in this space?
Well, Mr. Ramakrishnan, I must admit, I don't know much about the startup universe. I think except that it was growing too fast. And I think it is now, I think it was going too fast for comfort, I mean, so to say. And now I think the reality is sinking in. And so I think obviously, I think there is a phase of consolidation in some sense, or a phase of moderate growth that is setting in, because the reality is sinking in. I mean, I think it happened with many segments. It has happened in the past. Beyond that, I don't know the mechanics of the startup ecosystem. So I think I would stop there.
No, so if I come in, Ram, there, of course, like Bala said, there was a stage of low interest rates and excess liquidity in the system, and it was profitable to look for long-term returns in equity. And obviously, as usually happens, excesses happen when that situation remains that way for a long time. So, it had got to a state where people were willing to make a call saying that let's see what this company can make in 2027. Okay. And let us discount that forward and see what the valuation should be today. Normally, as most of you know, companies used to be valued with 1 year forward multiple, right? But during this time, what had happened was valuations had gone to 3 years hence, and look at the valuation at that point and discount that backwards to today's valuation. So these were obviously things that happen when there is so much liquidity sloshing around and people are looking for any avenue, because in debt anyway, you're not going to make anything. So might as well try to put in higher risk assets. So therefore, obviously, high liquidity chases more risk, right? So obviously, as the liquidity begins to contract in the world, and which is happening, obviously, post-pandemic curtailment is happening. I think the business models are getting more tested. So now people have started asking the question that it is not okay to see 20 profits in 27. Tell us what you will make in 24. Show us the unit economics today, whether you will make money today. So the focus slowly started shifting towards unit economics, and then of course to immediate profits, right? And which is a normal phenomena that happens in such situations. And therefore, obviously, valuations have come off and availability of money has reduced. So obviously, there will be some consolidation in this that will happen. And I think the good models, which are still viable, or companies which are able to flex their model suitably to make sure of the revised expectations of the investors are met, will still get money. It's not that the tap is completely going to go off, but I think it will be more selective, it will be more discreet, valuations will be more reasonable, all that will happen. So I don't think startup world has come to an end. I think that it remains active, but yes, some of these paradigms will change. But Ram, I just wanted to add one more thing other than this part of your question. You mentioned about Bala's optimism, but Bala manages funds which losses he passes on as NAVs. Bankers are boring people. They have to take the losses in their balance sheets. So I wanted to sound one, not a caution, but I personally think that this situation is not going to be as easy, and we can't muddle through this just by hoping for the best, right? My own belief is that the government will have to start. Of course, there is a set of things they have done: tax rate cuts, infra focus, PLI, IBC, more focus on inclusion, some labor reforms. Certain things have been done. But I think to get this cycle to change and really get onto a positive, I think a new round of seriously thought through, reimagined reforms are necessary. I'll give just a few examples, right? So one, I think, I will start. I know this is a topic for your next round of discussion. India's per capita income remains 2,500. If we can't get to 10,000 in some reasonable time, we are going to remain a poor country, right? I mean, we may get a size of the GDP, but the common man out there will benefit if per capita goes up, not the overall size, right? So one, I think labor. I think employment is a serious concern. It remains a concern, and therefore some reimagination of PLI schemes driving employment is very important in my mind. I think specific focus on that, one. Two, I think reimagining some urban employment programs like Manrega for rural, I think is very critical. So I think some reforms on that side will be critical. Spending money on softer sectors like education and healthcare, which are also employment generating, and also, India's average is about 3.5% of GDP. Average of the world is 6. I'm not talking of the best countries. Average of the world is 6%. So I think there are lots of these kind of, today 1 crore people are coming into the employability force every year. If we can't find employment for them, so I think there are things on these that have to be reimagined. I'll give you another example of things that can be reimagined. I think if we have to really go after urbanization, which is very critical, if we have to pull people out of 2,500 to 10,000, urbanization cannot be central government alone. So we have to create, Bala will understand this, we have to create bond markets, interesting financial instruments which will fund public-private partnerships for creating urban infrastructure, the drainage, water, all kind of urbanization, transport, all of that. I think we have to reimagine some of these and really pull ourselves out of it if we really want to get to a real serious cycle of growth. Otherwise, we'll muddle, but it is not enough. I think it will not take India to at least a $10,000 income.
Mr. Manian, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Actually, I think you ended up hitting the head on the nail. It was that strong. That is why we have in this panel discussion kept 2 panels. One to speak about economic growth. The other is to speak about how the benefits of economic growth will eventually percolate down and make a difference to our population. I'm going to turn a little bit, Bala, to you. Bala, clearly the real estate sector, after just plodding along for some time, has been showing some signs of resilience, recovery. Now, with the commodity pricing, with what's happening in terms of input prices, etc., and of course, competitive intensity being what it is, how do you see the real estate sector shaping up going forward?
In this industry,
again, nodding very vigorously.
Of course, what Manian said is, it's in some sense right, because we being the capital market player, of course, it's obvious to be optimistic, no doubt. Of course, taking into account the cognizance of the fact that some of the challenging time in which we live with, so we don't have a choice but to face the challenges and yet remain positive. I think from the real estate sector, clearly the fundamental issues that was hanging as a hanging sword for real estate sector, which is nothing but inventory. There has been a substantial reduction in inventory, including places like Mumbai, where the high-end properties are, the high inventory systems, that got actually sold quite a lot the last 2 years, especially during the pandemic time. The sector, if you ask me, got the biggest benefit of reduction of inventory was actually the real estate sectors. One, the demand came back. And second is that people could reduce the prices. And third, each of the state governments could support this sector by way of making a zero stamp duty kind of thing. So that actually really helped the industry to come out of the high inventory regime to low inventory regime. Second is the post the second half of pandemic. Clearly, the work from home have created some kind of new demand for owning a house versus having a house on a rental. In fact, today, if you have not, there are no data available today anywhere in the country. The number of houses available for rent has been going down. The rental yields have gone up. We take places like Bangalore, places like even Mumbai for that matter, you don't find enough houses for renting, mainly because of the number of houses available for rental has also come down. Maybe because of the multiple houses in which people are making investments earlier, and thanks to the change in the regulatory taxation, also reduced actually the people who are going after buying houses have got reduced. Therefore, there's also another trend that we are seeing. And third is the commercial real estate space. I think since the time the REIT was introduced, we have been seeing a significant improvement coming for the REIT as an investment, as an opportunity, also has come. I think all those things, if you look at, I think the hanging sword which is there for the real estate companies have got reduced from the point of a demand-supply equation more in favor of supply versus demand. Now I think either it comes to the equal or maybe the demand is a little higher than the supply, probably I can say. And there's also probably, I would say, since the time the RERA was introduced, it took some time for it to stabilize. Definitely the RERA is playing its own impact in bringing in the high level of discipline in every builder. And there's also something that has brought in the stability in the real estate sectors. Now, having seen, I think interest rates has seen one of the lowest. Even today, despite interest rates going up, the real estate borrowers continue to get money at a reasonably good rate. Therefore, the demand for borrowing and investing in household property remains some of the most attractive options. But input costs going up, no doubt is having an impact. I think in general, the input cost going up, and whether it is cement or the steel prices going up, definitely increase the cost of construction, no doubt. But having said that, I think the real estate companies generally keep margins anywhere between 20-25% kind of margin. Of course, the margin remains intact as long as it's able to complete the project well given on a time, which I think is estimating it. As long as they're able to construct the project within a 3 or 4 year period, definitely the margin doesn't get impacted, therefore they're able to sell. This is one segment I think need to be watched out for, given the fact that one, demand for housing has been rising, and rural demand, I think they've talked about urbanization kind of model, continues to remain one of the aspirations for the Indian savers. They're also, I think, leading to an increase in demand for real estate. This is one sector probably I would say is more poised for growth rather than seeing a downtime what you have seen in the past.
Excellent. Thanks. Dharamkirti, one question to you. I know you're not from the medical profession, but COVID rearing its head, particularly in Mumbai and Maharashtra, and likelihood of some more incidents. Where do you see that? Is there a surprise there that may be an unpleasant surprise?
Well, I think the unpleasant surprise, according to epidemiologists, can only come if the virus mutates itself into a very deadly virus, which we haven't seen any signs. I think so far the experience of the last 3 waves has been that the first wave was not that strong. The second wave in 21, April, May, same period last year, I think was very, very aggressive, and I think from a health perspective also. But the first wave hit the economy more than the second wave. I mean, the mobility had fallen by 86% during the first wave. Mobility fell by only about 60% during the second wave. The third wave was not that big, but I think the point is it still, I think it was spreading very fast. Yet the mobility had fallen only 15%. And right now, I think we've been hearing about the 4th wave for some time. The cases are rising, but the mobility is only increasing. I mean, so with each successive wave, the ability of the people to live with the virus has improved. The vaccination rates have reached, I think we are above the global levels. So I think a combination of these things, unless there is a big surprise coming in, means that it will not hurt the economic activity to the extent it had hit previously. So that's why we are so confident that the contact-based services will rebound this year. I mean, it won't lag behind. I think beyond this, I don't know much about this virus. I think we listen to what epidemiologists say, and then we factor it into our economic forecasting. And so far, I think there's no signal of it turning into.
Fair enough. I think that's a very balanced response, and I hope your words come true. And because we can't take one more given our population and given the status of our medical infrastructure, we can't afford another very sharp and, let us say, a more potent spike. Harji, last couple of days, I've had the pleasure of spending some time with Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev. Spent some time with him yesterday evening as well. And what he's trying to say about save soil is something that resonates very strongly. He had a couple of things to say which are very interesting. 84% of farmers in India have below 5 acres in terms of their acreage. And small and marginal farmers, and 56% of the farmland is with them. The other aspect is soil needs approximately 3% organic content. In India, the soil by and large is at 0.6% in terms of organic content. He propagated the need for incentives and how you can use artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to estimate the organic content in farms and try and find a way to remunerate the farmers or give them some sort of support for them to make the land more cultivable and not just flog the land with pesticides and with fertilizers and kill the land and erode the water and everything else. A quick view, I think we are running against time, so maybe a 30-40 second response.
So he's definitely 100% correct. Like I was saying earlier, water conservation is extremely, extremely essential also to the topsoil, simply because a lot of the farmers do random flood irrigation. That also helps in depleting minerals and the topsoil. What we really need to do is, today there are plenty of, there's a lot of information that one can really gather from satellite information. When you use newer technologies like IoTs, you use satellite mapping, you use satellite farming, you can pull a lot of information from that itself, rather than physically going land to land, farmer to farmer, and drawing samples and then doing lab analysis on the NPK ratios of the soil. These kind of technologies and these tools are available. But then again, it's corporate houses who can say, listen, I'm going to adopt these 2-3 villages. We're going to do our farming there. We're going to teach them how to farm correctly. And then I'm able to buy satellite time to analyze this farm land while using satellite data. So tools are available. There are plenty of IoT tools that are available. You can have sensors of the soil that gives you active readout. It helps when you educate farmers on crop rotation. It helps when you educate farmers on using simple bio waste and converting it into nutrients on your soil in a very simple method. I mean, you can use mulching, you can use vermicomposting, and all this can be done from farm waste which is being generated on the farms itself. So it is available. We just need to teach them to do it better.
Thanks,
rather than the simply.
Thank you so much. Mr. Manian, I think I would request you to kind of give your concluding remarks on this panel discussion. And Bala kicked it off on a very optimistic start. I would like you to have the last word.
Yeah. No, like we discussed, I think there are positives here in terms of the state of the economy in many ways, but there are also dark clouds around some of the aspects on inflation and supply constraints, oil prices, commodity prices, all of that. So I think it requires careful navigation and keeping all sectors of the economy in mind: the corporate sector, the agri sector, the MSMEs, and of course the individual people, right? So I think to get a holistic growth, I think it is going to be a tightrope walk from here. And it's not that there are no options, but these options will have to be carefully chosen, because wiggle room on many of these on the fiscal side is going to be not ample. So I would say India has had a track record of growing faster than the rest of the world economy. We still have the opportunity to do so if we make our right choices and keep our priorities right. That's how I would.
Thank you. Dharmakirti, you set the ball rolling. I'm going to ask a contrarian question. I mean, the government is talking about tightening up on liquidity, fighting inflation. As an economy, India needs GDP growth. India needs consumption. Is there a need for a further stimulus?
Well, I think see, there's no free lunch. I think stimulus would mean other things. Stimulus would mean government will have to borrow more. It would mean higher deficits, and it would mean already the debt is elevated. So I think right now it's the policy has to strike a balance. I mean, otherwise, I think the moment you announce additional borrowings, the interest rates are going to go up further. I mean, the yields are going to rise further. So it's a balancing act that has to be managed. Yes, I would say that the bottom of the pyramid has been hit very hard. And I think we need to do something more than what we have been doing. The urban poor had been hit hard. I was very worried about them until last year, but this year I'm not to that extent worried, because what's happening is the services sector, which is largely in the urban areas, I think is rebounding. So it's going to percolate down to some of the poorer people. It's also going to bring some of the people back from the rural areas to the urban areas. So there is some offsetting factor happening because of rebound in services. They do need support, and I think the best thing government has done and possibly could have done is to ensure that everybody has food to eat, which is through the and I think the scheme has been extremely generous of giving. I mean, they announced it even before the fiscal year kicked in. I mean, so the budget was proved. I mean, they went up the budget by 80,000 crore in just even before the fiscal year kicked in. So I think you need it, but I think you have to decide whether you want to protect your medium run. Also, you have to invest as well. So I think it's all about striking a balance.
I think that brings us to
Ram, I would like to add, I think this is the time, like I said in my earlier thing, I think we have to think of policy stimulus rather than only fiscal stimulus. I think we have to do certain reimagine policy measures. That's important.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of this conversation. I mean, we could have really gone on. We have a very distinguished panel. We started about 6 minutes late, so I have kind of stretched this a little bit. But thank you so very much. I'm very grateful to Dharmakirti, to Mr. Manian, to Bala, to Harjeev. Thank you so much for really being a part of this panel. Very grateful. We have another very interesting conversation happening. If any of you can stay on for the people at the bottom of the pyramid, we will appreciate, because you at the top of the pyramid have to pull up the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Thank you so very much. Absolutely delighted.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Can we have the next panel on, please?
So the second session is on social impact at the bottom of the pyramid. May I request Dr. R. Ramakrishnan to present the introductory address and hand over to the moderator of the session, Mr. Atul Joshi, founder and CEO, Oyster Capital Management Advisory. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you kindly ensure that all the, okay. I think it's my absolute pleasure in terms of having the next topic being picked up. What is very important is the need to percolate the benefits of economic growth and development to the bottom of the pyramid. As per the World Inequality Report 2022, India is amongst the most unequal countries in the world, with rising poverty and an affluent elite. The report highlights that the top 10% of India holds 57% of India's wealth, and the top 1% of India holds 22% of the total national income. I think the bottom 50% share has gone down to 13% in terms of India's economy. The average national income of the Indian adult is 2,04,000 rupees. Here, the bottom 50% of India earns a very, very small 53,610 rupees, while the top 10% earns it in millions. Gender inequality is another issue. Very clearly, the opportunities for women, and I plead guilty in this panel discussion, where we have got about 9 speakers and 2 moderators. We have my dear friend, Dr. Shubhada Rao, speaking up for the 50% women of India. And I mean, I haven't shown adequate sensitivity to gender inequality. And probably, my confidence in Shubhada is she's equivalent to the other 9. And so the balance will be maintained. I think very clearly India needs to look at social innovation, social inclusion, and we really need to look at the bottom of the pyramid very differently. I think with these words, I would now like to briefly introduce the panelists. Dr. Shubhada Rao, founder of Quantico Research, is going to be our first speaker. She brings 32 years of experience in academia and industry. She currently holds board positions in 2 Indian companies as an independent director. A gold medalist and a PhD in economics from University of Mumbai. She has been the economist or chief economist of ICICI, Times Bank, CRISIL, Bank of Baroda, Kotak Institutional Equities, and she was senior group president and chief economist at Yes Bank prior to setting up Quantico as the founder. Shubhada has been a great friend of IMC and of me personally. She has always been there to address any queries, questions, contribute her thought leadership. She's also played an important role in other industry associations, but we kind of, because she's Bombay based, we lend her to other institutions which are probably a little more Delhi centric. So she has been chairperson of the economics committee of ASSOCHAM, member of the CII National Economic Policy Council, and member monetary policy group of IBA. She has also been associated with BCCI in the past. As a thought leader, she has made very valuable and extensive presentations on India to the boards of Indian companies, and internationally, she has been consulted by Federal Reserve, Bank of India, Bank of Canada, ministers and international delegations, foreign ministers, finance ministers who have come to India, consul generals and high commissioners of embassies. So Shubhada, real pleasure that you are a part of this panel. Mr. Joshi is going to be the moderator of this session. Mr. Joshi, would you like me to introduce each panelist at the right time, or would you? I think that will kind of give a little more emphasis, so I can come in to introduce the panelist just before the panelist speaks. Otherwise, the memory will be short.
Sure. That's
my
fine.
Valuable friend, Mr. Atul Joshi, a doyen in terms of IMC, a person who has been very passionate, a banker, an economic thinker, and a person who is involved in multiple sectors in terms of India, is really focused on infrastructure quite a bit, and he's been a great friend and a great pillar of strength to all of us. So I think, Atul, in case you would like to say a few opening remarks, and then we will ask Shubhada to kindly speak.
Sure. So first of all, let me congratulate you. A very engrossing discussion you've had, and a lot to learn, to be very frank. Let me put the context of today's topic, which is social impact at the bottom of the pyramid. With the turn of the century, I think we've seen some of the most dramatic two decades in the human history. We started off with the dot-com crisis that gripped the Western world, but that became a job opportunity for India. Outsourcing became the keyword for the Western world, but outsourcing became a source of job in India. That resulted in urban educated people migrating. So far, we used to see only the lower class, the labor, the blue collar migrating to factories and to farms, etc. First time we started seeing a large number of educated graduates, engineers, software engineers started migrating. Now this had its own social impact. We had a breakup of joint families. We started seeing a very large demand for real estate. As Bala was mentioning, the rentals, the demand for rentals started off with outsourcing. The demand for auto went up. The demand for white goods went up. But this was a social impact emerging from an economic development, which was the outsourcing. Come 2004 to 2008, in fact, to date, we see a lot of infrastructure development, whether it is ports, airports, roads, power. India has done a phenomenal job. We Indians love to criticize ourselves, but let me put on record, India launched the largest PPP program in the world, and to date, it has been the most successful PPP in the world. No other country has had this feat, what India has achieved. But that is one part of the economic development. The social impact of that was seen and felt at the lowest level, at the rural most last villages of this country, whether it was tourism or transportation of food articles, etc. While all of this was happening between 2004 and 2008, a social revolution happened. The have-nots of the society suddenly started getting access to money. And that happened with the advent of the microfinance institutions and the self-help groups. That created not just a financial revolution at the bottom of the pyramid, it also started educating them, and awareness for education and awareness for health. That was the sidekick of MFI and SHG. While we talk about all of this, we cannot ignore the role played by technology. And whether it was social media, it was internet, it was smartphones, etc., the list is longer. But I think the essence of that could be captured when we see a small vegetable vendor, an old lady who may not even be literate, using a UPI pay for selling, let's say, 10 rupees of tomatoes. That's the revolution at the bottom of the pyramid that this country has seen in the last 22 years. And I think the best way to look at it is to first look at from the macro perspective, and who better than Dr. Shubhda Rao. So now let me invite Dr. Shubhda Rao to make her opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Shubhda Rao.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, IMC, for inviting me. And thank you for that a little bit of an over-generous introduction of mine. Atul, thanks a lot. I think you've set the context brilliantly, and that makes my task a little bit easier. And I just would, before I just get into the flow of conversation, just would like to know, maybe I have about 6 to 7 minutes to get my points shared with you on this August platform with the most amazing esteemed line of speakers that I would be enjoying my knowledge sharing with. Being an economist, I would typically...
I'll take half a minute only.
Yeah.
I think it's also my pleasant responsibility to recognize the other members of the panel who are also present here. Dr. Habil Khorakiwala, founder chairman, WOCAD. Dr. Khorakiwala, very grateful for sparing your time and interacting with me, interacting with Mr. Joshi, and kind of discussing with us about this particular session. So absolutely grateful. Mr. Mahesh Sharma, MD and CEO, SBI Life Insurance. Looking forward to hearing you, Mr. Mahesh Sharma. Really looking forward to getting a lot of valuable inputs in terms of what can life insurance do to provide a safety net at the bottom of the pyramid. Thank you so very much. Mr. Sanjay Datta, Chief for Underwriting, Reinsurance and Claims, ICICI Lombard. He brings a tremendous perspective relating to the non-life part of the insurance, what can be done in terms of health insurance, what can be done in terms of other forms of insurance, such as crop insurance or asset insurance, in terms of the situation we are in. So looking forward to your thought leadership. And Dr. Akhil Shahani, Managing Director of Shahani Group. Akhil is actually the person who's going to be, in a sense, the Sutradhar. He's going to link up education, skill development, employability, and employment generation almost seamlessly. So Akhil, you'll have to do a lot of heavy lifting on this, and that is where we need to see the impact on the bottom of the pyramid. So thank you, panelists. Really appreciate all of you being here. So a virtual applause for all of you. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Shubhda.
Thanks. Thank you, Ram. So as I was saying that being an economist, I would like to just utilize a minute or two to give why we are discussing what we are discussing today, that is the impact of growth and how best we can avoid what we economists call a K-shaped kind of a growth, which is essentially an uneven growth, and work towards a more equitable growth as India aspires to get into a $5 trillion economy, or real terms, the growth of about 7 to 8%, which unfortunately seems a little bit of an aspirational growth currently, given the kind of the huge cuts that we have seen with the global turmoil. Typically, all economic crises affect the entire population, but importantly, they affect the most and the longest the bottom of the pyramid. And that is where we need to, as a group of thinkers, as thought leaders, need to comprehensively address some of these critical questions of the social sectors, namely health, education, employment. These three typically get labeled as the soft infrastructure, and where India stands to have a tremendous potential, but perhaps because of some of the policy execution challenges, we have not yet reached our complete potential. Having said, I think a quick backdrop of this decade has started with an extremely challenging scenario. 2.5 years of COVID environment. This economic crisis has been very different from the past economic crises, where the typical remedy was to extend fiscal stimulus to address the growth and employment shock, and the economy would respond with growth opportunities, greater job creation, and work itself way out of the problem. Whereas this current economic crisis has been dramatically different. It's not just a growth shock, employment shock, but it has been a global health shock. And that's where the entire context became very different. And unfortunately, the policymakers, particularly in the developed markets, used the same rule book to mitigate the kind of issues and problems that the global economy needed to get out of. That is because a whole lot of health shocks related to leading of supply chain shocks, the supply bottlenecks, and in the midst of a humongous, unprecedented expansion of balance sheets, both by the governments and central banks of the developed world and across the world economy, what we saw was a paving way for a huge inflation problem and growth playing a very, very distant second lead in terms of the recovery. And that's where we are currently, unfortunately, with most of the central banks grappling with a multi-decade inflation, almost 4-decade high inflation, be it US, UK, Eurozone. That has been the biggest challenge. And it becomes more pertinent because that is where, typically when we need to address growth and employment, it takes that much longer because inflation control takes precedence over everything else. And that's unfortunately what we may see coming close to India as well when we address our current inflation problem, which is a lot to do with the global spillovers, international spillovers in the form of commodity shocks, and in terms of food and crude oil and so on. And to that extent, inflation has been very stubborn at over close to 7% for a few months now, 6 to 7% over the last few months. It therefore becomes very important to address more comprehensively at this current point in time some of the social sectors which Ram alluded to, and in the previous session, which Mr. Manian very brilliantly elaborated on as to what we really need to do in terms of addressing some of these very critical issues. Healthcare comes first. Typically is COVID really showcased the kind of inadequate health infrastructure, not just in India, but I think the world over, the kind of scale of health shock that the world had. Obviously, no economy was prepared to mitigate that kind of a health shock very efficiently and in a timely manner. But it drove home the point that health infrastructure is extremely critical to be able to withstand any of the shocks and minimize the kind of a collateral damage that we saw in India as well. And here we would like to elaborate on the public healthcare and the private. And the earlier speaker, Mr. Manian, also spoke of that. Unfortunately, because of the fiscal headroom being limited, the public expenditure is able to share only 2% of its GDP towards the health infrastructure and health facilities. And that too, the focus would be essentially, and rightfully so, on rural healthcare, on primary healthcare. The private healthcare system has been more concentrated and focused on tier 1, tier 2 cities and metros. And this is where perhaps we need a combined force to address the reach, the outreach of the healthcare services to the rural economy, where what comes in handy would be the technology platform. We saw the telemedicine really take off in the last 2 years, and probably not just in the abnormal times, we probably need to harness this. India definitely has the potential. We have a very wide availability of medical staff. We also have been trying to attract medical tourism, but what we really need to address domestically are the challenges of the rural outreach. And second, and more important, is the cost and affordability of the medical health services. I think as long as we need to get our priorities right in terms of how best we combine public healthcare plus private healthcare provision by both the players, I think that's going to pave way for a more sustainable kind of a population health. Second, and more importantly, is the education piece, where employment comes to fore, to understand why we need to create a huge pool of employable people to meet the gaps, that critical gaps that we have in the demand supply of the skill sets that are required by the various sectors. And here I would like to applaud that the IMC has been working in this direction very adequately and begun to work well in addressing some of these flagship programs as to how do we identify the skill set gaps and look at bridging these non-availability of labor supply for the relevant sectors. Anecdotally, we know that Manrega can be acting as a double-edged sword, because you are an assured income per month, per year. Many times in the recent months post-COVID, we have seen non-availability of labor becoming a sizable issue. And this is where we policymakers need to have a scheme, a framework of how we best incentivize the workers to get out of the mindset of be happy with the Manrega kind of dispensation and not look out for work. The recent studies, both by IMF and the domestic institutions, have shown that there has been a significant drop in the labor force participation rate, and more so of women during the COVID times. I think these are the critical risks that we need to address, and how we address, I'm going to be coming to that very soon. Clearly, financial inclusion is the third pillar that we need to address, and how we reach that last mile, the bottommost of the pyramid. And I would quite say with great confidence that here India has done exceptionally well in harnessing technology, getting the UPI system being rolled out in such a fashion that today India stands at the top, probably close to 3x or 3 times of what China does in terms of the payment transactions, and even much more so, perhaps close to about 6.5 to 7% of what the developed world does, be it US, UK, Canada, France, Germany, or you name the developed markets. India has been right on top in terms of effectively getting UPI. And why do we talk of UPI? Because financial inclusion can use UPI as the biggest channel through which we can actually bring about some equitability in terms of incomes, in terms of per capita incomes rising. That is simply because the moment you have UPI kind of a behavior being adopted by right to the bottommost strata of the population, we have an availability of credit scores, a credit history that could help the financial institutions and financial intermediaries to get more confidence in extending kind of a loan or soft loan. Self-help groups have been doing it, but I think we need to get a broader reach through more other financial sector entities to expedite the whole process. And the reason why I bring out all together is probably it is a time we introduced Gati Shakti in October of 2021 for hard infrastructure. I think there is time now to perhaps very actively explore a platform where we can use a similar idea, a thought process of Gati Shakti for the soft infrastructure, which is basically health, education, and labor productivity. I think unless and until we do that, we will not be able to comprehensively address the underlying common issues, which are the cost, which is basically the last mile delivery and execution efficiency, and more importantly, the availability of the right labor force for the right work. So unless and until we have reimagining of some of these policies, probably our growth will remain as inequitable as Ram did share through the statistics in his introductory remarks. What we need to do is comprehensively and cohesively address the K-shape and make it into a V-shaped recovery for India as an economy as a whole. With this, I'll stop with my opening remarks and we can take it later on the Q&A. Thank you, Ram.
Atul, with your permission, can I introduce Dr. Habil Khorakiwala, or would you like to make a couple of comments? Okay. Actually, it's an absolute honor that Dr. Habil Bhai Khorakiwala, founder chairman of WOCHART, has joined us. Very, very grateful. Dr. Habil Khorakiwala is an industry stalwart and continues to don numerous hats in his professional life of 5 decades, while keeping his scientific temper as a young learner intact. An alumnus of Purdue University and Harvard Business School, Dr. Khorakiwala, with his mantra of vision to execute, has successfully led WOCHART to be a major Indian pharmaceutical company. As a matter of fact, during the COVID situation, the role played by WOCHART Hospital, and in terms of even their overseas ventures, I think has been a remarkable success story. Dr. Khorakiwala has served key positions as president of FICCI, IPA, and served in various Government of India forums. He has been a member of World Economic Forum for a long time, as an active Rotarian and a member of the Arch C. Clumph Society of Rotary International. Dr. Khorakiwala has received the Global Indian of the Year 2018-19 award from Asia One magazine and URS Media Consulting PL. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award at Pharma Excellence Awards by Frost & Sullivan in 2012 and by Indian Express Group in 2006. His alma mater, Purdue University, bestowed the prestigious Distinguished Alumnus Award for significant contribution to the profession of pharmacy. And not only that, they honored him with the honorary doctorate in 2010. And I think that is a tremendous recognition. In 2017, Dr. Khorakiwala authored Odyssey of Courage, a book chronicling his entrepreneurial journey. And in 2018, he established the WOCHART School of Courage. Mr. Juzer Khorakiwala, president of Indian Merchants Chamber, is also here. And we would all like to convey our gratitude to you, Dr. Habil, for joining us. What we would like to request you to do is, being a doyen of the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector, if you can speak about what's likely to happen in terms of how we can make healthcare more inclusive, how can we impact the bottom of the pyramid, what can we do in terms of making Indian healthcare even stronger in the future, and how can we really make a difference in providing a security to our teeming millions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the lovely words and introduction. IMC President and my brother Juzer, Ms. Ramakrishnan, Ms. Joshi, my colleagues on the panel, and the members of IMC and friends. I think one is really talking today about the bottom of pyramid. And when we talk of that segment of India, we are fundamentally focusing on 3 areas: employment, education, and health. And I think we have economists, we have people from finance and insurance and other walks of life. And being my focus and experience, not only exclusive, but greatly in the healthcare, I intend to focus from the perspective of healthcare. The second aspect, which I thought when I talk of healthcare, one talks of hospitals, one talks of doctors, talks of pharmaceutical and biotech industries, diagnostic, then now digital. So I think I'm trying to look from this much larger perspective, and also a more balanced view, because there are a lot of positives happening, a lot of strengths here, and a lot of problems we have. So I call it, okay, we live in a healthcare industry or activity in the country it is really a paradox. It is a paradox because we are very wealthy on one hand, and we are very poor on the other hand. And first, let me just stay where we are really wealthy. We are wealthy because our medical profession are amongst the best anywhere in the world. And that is what many of us do not recognize, that the medical treatment you get in our hospital, treatment you get through our doctors, are some of the very best. And many of us want to go to Western countries for the treatment. There are areas where we don't have those facilities. So maybe it's slightly better, but most of the areas, they are really outstanding. And one sees that many of Indian doctors are there, whether you go to US, UK, and many other countries. Second, are hospitals, private hospitals, and even government hospitals, which government has created new IIMs in some of the areas. They are really world-class in terms of its facility, in terms of equipment, in terms of infrastructure, in some of even staffing of nurses and technicians. If we look at our medical education, we are wealthy, because the quality of our medical education, if you look at it, both the cost at which it is available in the government hospital is highly subsidized. More than 95% of cost is subsidized. Secondly, in terms of quality of clinical opportunities one gets because of sheer amount of work available, is what we produce some of the best doctors and professionals in medical area. The other area I consider we are very wealthy is some of the areas in vaccine and pharmaceutical area. We produce and supply, even before COVID, nearly more than 50% of vaccines in the world. And I believe we are very wealthy. In my personal view, is slightly different than earlier speaker, is I think we have managed COVID-19 amongst the very best in the world. Everybody has made a mistake. Everybody had a problem of infrastructure problem. We were not very unique. Look at United States and most of the European countries. Their own infrastructure is broken down completely in the healthcare. In fact, they have so much pending cases of the elective procedure and surgery, which, because they were all in focus on COVID, and that is getting, we have pending, but they are nothing comparable to what they have in their infrastructure. Look at our pharma industry per se. 20 years back, we were hardly there in the United States. Today, nearly 60% of prescription written, the products comes out of Indian manufacturing. And that is very unique, and it demonstrates real competitive nature of the industries in vaccine, in pharmaceutical, even HIV, AIDS. You see it is under control, nobody talks about it. And we do not recognize underlying idea that it is Indian companies who supplied these medicine to Africa and other countries at a very fraction of a cost. And that really helped contain the spread of HIV/AIDS. And I believe that is what exactly we will do in the areas of the COVID management over the next year, 2 years. It would be India, which would be a major supplier to many of these countries, because what you get is here in 200 rupees, government buys it. There it is sold for $30 and $40 a dose. So there is a massive advantage sitting here. The other important aspect is India spends roughly 7 to 8% Indian industry on research and innovation. We talk more about it, and that is our strength, and that is a strength which will take India forward in becoming not only a large producer, which Prime Minister always says we are the pharmacy of the world, but we may become the important innovative center in next 10, 15 years. Now, let me focus on the other part of India and the healthcare. And I believe we are very poor because a majority of our people in the rural areas, semi-urban areas, do not access simple medicine, simple healthcare available. And that is our big problem we have. Second, even our own healthcare parameters of, say, infant mortality, which has improved over the years dramatically, but it is worse than our neighbors like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. And we also see very high disparity within the country. There are certain parts of India like south, like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, or Maharashtra. The management of the total healthcare in terms of facilities, professional medical doctors and their practices, medicine available and production. On one hand, it is far better than what you see in other parts of India like UP, Bihar, Eastern India. So this is a kind of another paradox that we are not able to provide, and that is mainly because we are poor because government spends only 2%, as you rightly said, on healthcare, and the private investment is about 5%, and that has to change. But at the same time, the government have taken a lot of initiative in the last few years, which I think is very important. And if that initiative is accelerated, I'm sure, and government starts spending more funding to maybe 5% or so in next 5 years from 2%, gradually increasing. I think this is a problem which we can deal with it, and we may not be as poor as we are today, hopefully in next 5 years or so. The second and most important aspect is the medical institution, which is managed by the government. 30 years back, 40 years back, they were the area of excellence. They were producing some of the finest doctors, surgeons. The quality of care and the clinical outcome was absolutely top of the line. Today, if you compare that, it has gradually over the years deteriorated. And that is where most of the poor goes for free treatment. And that is something one needs to look at how, what government wants to do to correct it. Partly they have done it through funding provision that anyone can go to a private institution, they fix the rates and they can get treated. But that is one very big area of problem we have, that our basic healthcare facility. Even small dispensaries in rural areas. We have dispensaries, there is a budget allocation. Sometimes you don't have doctors, sometimes you don't have medicine. And if any one of the aspect is not there, the patient doesn't get treated properly. So I think I will reserve my observation initially now, and I'll have the other panel members to give their views, and maybe in a Q&A session or discussion session, I will elaborate some of the areas.
Thank you, Habil Bhai. That has been absolutely enlightening and wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us an excellent perspective on the landscape of the richness in terms of health and the poverty in terms of health and health infrastructure. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Mahesh Kumar Sharma, MD and CEO, SBI Life Insurance Limited. He's been MD and CEO of SBI Life since 2020, and he joined State Bank of India as a probationary officer in the year 1990. During a span of 32 years in the bank, he has served in various geographical locations, both in India and abroad. He has handled very important responsibilities such as Regional Head East Asia, Hong Kong, CEO, State Bank of India, Tel Aviv branch, DGM LHO Delhi, and DGM B&O Jaipur. Mr. Sharma has done his Masters of Science in Chemistry and is also a certified associate of the Indian Institute of Bankers. Under his leadership, SBI Life has done a lot of innovation, whether it comes to technology, whether it comes to customer service, whether it comes to information, data mining, and a whole variety of customer experience. So we would like to hear from you, Mr. Sharma, about insurance, of course, in terms of the bottom of the pyramid. What are the government initiatives relating to life insurance? What are the private insurance players' response to those government initiatives? Is it profitable to do insurance at the bottom of the pyramid? What can be done in terms of policy changes to both increase the depth and width in terms of this? So over to you, sir, and we look forward to your very valuable comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramakrishnan. It was kind of you to introduce me. So I'll start with a general outlook on the insurance industry and how it is in India and across the world, and then I'll come down to the questions that you asked about the bottom of the pyramid and how do we go about doing that. So the first thing that we need to see is that the insurance penetration in India is very, very low. So if you look at insurance penetration to the GDP, so we have about 3.4%, or like it started off with 3.24 in 2015, went up to 4.2 in 2021, but I think that's more because of the the GDP shrinking rather than any other thing. So that it has not really moved much. But if you look at the insurance density, that is the premium paid per capita, so that comes to about $55 for India, and I think in China it's about $240, and then around the world it's about $800 in some of the developed countries. So that is the level of under penetration that we have in insurance in India. The coverage, if you look at the protection, the gap, that is the protection that is required for our population vis-a-vis what we have a gap of 83%. So for every 100 rupees of insurance that we need, we have got about 17 rupees worth of it. And so basically we are very, very underinsured and underpenetrated. So that is one of the things that I'd like to say. The other thing is that we have a very large population which we need to cover. So you were asking about the government schemes. PMJJBY, which is the life insurance coverage scheme which the government has introduced. It covers about 6.5 crore people. Okay, that was the latest figure that we had, that 6.5 crore people were covered by PMJJBY, but we have a population of about 130 crores, and out of that, we need, even if you take a look at the working population or the work population that can actually work about 15 years or something, it will be a very major part of that. So that in spite of that, we need a lot of more things to happen. But what has happened is that historically in India, insurance was also always sold as an investment product, and as a result of which the insurance awareness is not really there in the population. Most of the people would, think of insurance as something where you deposit amounts every year or every month, and then you would get some return at the end of the period. Now, that is one of the things that you have, but insurance is not really that. It is majorly the coverage that you get for unforeseen events, in the event of a death. The other thing is that in India, one of the problems is that people don't talk about death very easily. So the conversation, the way to pitch insurance is also a big challenge in India. I mean, how do you go and tell somebody that, if you imagine that you die, what happens to your family? So it has to be worded very, very, in very flowery language. And really speaking, it's not something which everybody can do. So insurance sales is also something which is a thing on which you need to train people over and over and over. So, in spite of having lakhs of agents, you would probably have around 25 lakhs approximately across the country, 25 lakh insurance agents, but still you would find that everybody is not able to sell as much as we would like them to sell. Moreover, the financial awareness is not there in the population. So if you ask me, very few people in the urban areas are really actually actively planning financially for their future, for their families, for their retirement, etc. So this is something. So these are the challenges that we have today. And thanks to the pandemic, I should say, I mean, even though it has been a horrible period for all of us around the world, and this is unprecedented. We have never seen any disruption of this scale. But thanks to the awareness created by this pandemic and the fact that many people very unexpectedly, lost their lives, and this was a segment of the population which had never been affected by earlier pandemics, or any other epidemic. It was the young people, you had young people also dying. Earlier, it always used to be the weaker ones, the poorer ones who couldn't afford healthcare, the ones, very old ones, or the ones with other related diseases. But COVID sort of, equalized all that, and there were a lot of lives which were lost, which was in the very productive stage, and almost every family was affected, either near ones within the family or just in close proximity. So it actually increased the awareness that life is uncertain and there needs to be some kind of protection for that. So insurance awareness actually in the last 2 years, and I think the industry has worked very hard to cover all the people who came to us for a cover, and that has also helped in increasing the penetration. And here I would like to say that it is not only the people in the cities or only the rich people who have got themselves insured. There has been an awareness across the population, and as a result of which we are seeing a lot of demand for more and more term protection and other insurance policies, which was not there earlier. So coming back to the bottom of the pyramid, how do we increase the penetration of insurance, and how do we make sure that and I'm talking not only about the life insurance sector, also health insurance. Dr. Khoragiwala said a lot about the need for health services and health facilities for all the population. One of the things that will help in this is if everybody had a health insurance, then obviously, the facilities would be easier to provide facilities, because then the affordability would come to large sections of the population. And So that is something which we need to do, and we need to increase the awareness about insurance across the board. So that is the first thing, for which the industry has now launched a campaign, which is called Sabse Pehle Life Insurance, and we are trying to increase that awareness that life insurance is something which we need to look at as one of the initial things that you need for your for planning your life. Then we have all the companies today have a very rural centric approach also. You will find a lot of insurance companies even in the private sector today expanding. Everybody has plans to expand in the rural and semi-urban areas. And then the government, of course, has got all these schemes like the PMJJBY, the PM Jan Arogya Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana. So all these are steps in the right direction, and there have been a few tweaks in the pricing, and it's made it a scheme which can be pushed very aggressively and across the country and will benefit all the population. So that is something. The main piece is the technology. So what has happened is that today you have a lot of technology that is available which can reach the farthest corners of the country. You don't need an agent to actually go all the way to each corner of the country. So what happens is that there are places which are underpenetrated because we don't have a branch there or something like that. So today it is quite possible for agents to, with one visit or with some kind of leads which are generated from rural areas, to actually try to sell insurance using technology. So that is something which is also happening, and the end-to-end process has also been digitized. Most of the insurers today can do onboarding to claim settlement online, and this can be done either directly or on assisted mode. And there are enough number of people in the rural areas also who can assist the population to do that. So finally the distribution. So we have one of the fantastic things that has happened is the Jan Dhan scheme. So almost everybody's got a bank account today, and most of the banks today are linked to one insurer or the other, and they are all capable of selling insurance to the people. And this can be done through the over lakhs of branches that are there across the country. And that is the biggest strength going forward, that we will be able to cover all these people. The programs are there, the policies are there, government support is there. The insurance companies see a good lot of good in, for their business also, and for the country in covering all the population. And so I think going forward, this is a very good, very happening sector that we need to look forward to.
Thank you so very much. I think you have painted a beautiful canvas for us to understand what is happening in terms of the sector, and juxtaposing what's happening internationally with what's happening in India gave us a very nice flavor. I think now I will move to Dr. Akhil Shani. Akhil, now you have to do some heavy lifting on education, skill development, employment generation, and raising the standard of living, poverty alleviation. So you really have to become our Niti Ayog in this panel. Dr. Akhil Sharma is the managing director of the Shani Group, which runs a franchise range of colleges in areas like business, media, real estate, finance, and others. His colleges bring in global-oriented education systems and that focus on making their students truly employable. He runs an edtech platform called ASK.careers and a recruitment firm, ASK Talent Services. So in terms of his businesses, education, career counseling, career development, on to recruitment and finding employability for not only the students who pass out of his institutions, but to people who desire employment. I think that is an end-to-end that he does. And apart from that, he is the chairman of Global Discovery Schools, a franchise chain of 14 innovative schools that are really transforming the educational sector. Akhil also is extensively involved in the non-profit space. He is on the advisory board of United Unlimited India and IDO BRO, which are two incubators supporting social entrepreneurs. He is the director of the Sage Foundation and a trustee of the Shani Trust, which both have a range of charitable initiatives in education. He sits on the board of only 28 iconic colleges in Mumbai. So I really had to somehow get hold of Akhil onto this panel. Otherwise, I would have had to had 3 other domain experts joining. He has done his MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management in Chicago and his doctorate in education from the University of Liverpool, where his thesis is in the area of student employability. So today he is walking the talk from his research to what he is doing in terms of acting on his research. Akhil has been listed as one of the top 50 thought leaders in higher education. He has been recognized with some sterling awards for his work in education, like the Jamnalal Bajaj Award, Bharat Shiromani Award, PIMR Outstanding Educationist Award, amongst others. So over to you, Dr. Akhil Shani. To be frank, I'm looking forward to a very educative experience.
Thank you, Ram. And since you've given me such a vast range of topics from literacy to employability to higher education and joblessness, and you've given me only 5 minutes, I'm going to have to sort of focus my conversation to a specific lens. So let's talk about...
Probably, given the nature of the topic, it would take about 7 minutes, 8 minutes. We'll just play it by the ear. Or you could split it up and we'll come back to the Q&A, whichever. So.
Fair enough. So I think what we should do is let's actually talk about the focus is saying at the bottom of the pyramid. How do we actually provide social impact to the bottom of the pyramid? And let me talk about a good example of a fictional young boy called Raju, whose father is a dairy farmer in Palghar, right? His father is semi-literate. Raju goes to a village school. And how can we actually increase his wealth? Now, remember one thing is that when we define wealth, I will actually define this as entering maybe the low middle class. That means that you are able to, let's say, buy or rent a home, pay EMIs, you have a scooter or a car, you have a nice, well-paying job, and you have 3 square meals a day and you can educate your kids. So in my mind, what is the pathway to get Raju, the son of the dairy farmer from Palghar, into that white collar role? So let's talk about each segment of his journey, starting from K-12 education to higher education, to skilling, to the job, and let's see if we can try to make some sense about in the 7 minutes that I have remaining. So let's talk about currently some statistics that we have in India. According to the latest numbers, India's got literacy rate is 76%. That means, and all due respect to all the governments that we've had over the last 50 years, that literacy rate has increased by 10% every decade. So it's not really a matter of government policy. A lot of it's based on that old adage saying that India grows at night when the government sleeps. There's basically a ground swelling of people at the bottom level trying to make themselves more literate. But let's talk a bit about literacy in these small village schools where these kids study. Now, there is something called PISA, which is the Program for International Student Assessment, which actually assesses the literacy rate of countries in terms of saying, can 15-year-olds understand maths? Can they read properly? Can they have some basic level of common sense? India, when we entered that PISA assessment in 2008, out of 190 countries, we ranked 182, which means we had countries like Kazakhstan, Cambodia, and even Pakistan ranking higher than us. And after that, India refused to enter that PISA program again because they said we don't want to show how bad we are. So the problem is let's talk about what exactly can we do to increase quality education in village schools. Now, again, even though I've got an edtech company and I invest in edtech companies themselves, before COVID, the thing was, okay, if we could roll out technology in all these village schools, all these rural areas, suddenly education would be fantastic, everybody would do well, and literacy and quality of education would shoot up because of technology. Well, we had a 2-year experiment with COVID, and unfortunately, at the end of the 2-year experiment, literacy levels have not increased. Quality of education has actually gone down. They actually are talking about a lost generation of kids who, because of being forced to try to look at education through online methods, have actually done very badly. And it's not just in rural areas, even urban. I mean, I feel very scared about the doctors who graduate with 2 years of online education and are supposed to be brain surgeons. So, concerned. So honestly, technology is not the solution. Doesn't mean that it is not there, but let's talk about what really will really make a difference in education in these smaller schools. Now, one thing you need to understand is that India, we have a very, very high regard for education. A family will starve to send their kids to a good quality school. So in spite of the government having a lot of free schools available, there are a lot of families who are willing to pay 100 rupees a month to go to what's called private budget schools. And very often a private budget school in a rural area would be like, let's say an individual teacher who has a small hut, but make sure that they give good quality education and provides education for 100 rupees, 200 rupees a month, but because to make sure that he can live. So what happens is that when you look at quality education, ultimately the difference between a budget school and a free school is the quality of the teacher, right? And it's not even a function that the teacher of the budget school is better in terms of more educated than the teacher in the free school. What happens is that there's more oversight. So as you all know, is that we actually have schools in almost every district, and every kid from a village can get access to those schools. Unfortunately, what happens is that a lot of the teachers, they hold 2 jobs, they don't show up. There's like actually no focus on the quality of education being imparted in the schools. So the number one thing I would suggest that we really need to do to improve the quality of education for Raju, the son of the Delhi farmer, is to have more oversight on the teaching that happens in these small schools. The government has been fantastic in giving oversight on our businesses, and it's not difficult to do. It's just that making sure that the teachers, when they have been employed in the school, they actually show up to teach, and there's some sort of tracking of the outcomes of the quality of the teaching, which is easy to do. So oversight is there. Another thing which is fascinating is that one of the most successful indicators of quality education, one of the biggest changes or the things that really created the quality of education in this country is the midday meal scheme. Why is that? Understand, if you are from the bottom of the pyramid, very often you are sent out from your family home, like into the local village school, you're walking. Very often you don't have breakfast, that means the blood sugar is low. Very often, if you don't have a midday meal, you are not eating for breakfast, for lunch, and only when you come back home in the evening do you get one meal. Now what happens is that you've not eaten breakfast, not had lunch, your blood sugar has gone down, you have no energy. How are you going to sit and pay attention to what the teacher is saying? So the midday meals program that actually was taken out by the government in a few years ago has actually helped a lot to actually get kids to be a little more focused on their education and actually listen to what the teacher is saying. So in fact, one of the biggest problems during the 2 years of COVID was that the midday meals were not sent to the schools because there are no schools. So the kids' level of education went down because they couldn't even focus because they were just starving. It's just not available. So the thing is that when I look at the quality of education, you make sure they're good quality midday meals, make sure there's a lot more teacher training and oversight. And of course, a bit of tech is important. The thing is that, of course, you can't necessarily be expected to give each and every village kid, let's say, a nice smartphone and also a good quality internet connection. However, you can definitely have, let's say, when you go into the village school, you can have like a screen which has pre-recorded lectures where you have a facilitator sort of supporting the kid. Because remember one thing, the key thing about a teacher is that they understand the kids in their classes, right? So they can say, okay, Raju, you're a little weak in maths. Let me try to help you in maths. Let's say, Sunita, you're very smart in, let's say, in physics. Let's try to help you that way. So good quality teacher training, oversight, midday meals, and a bit of tech will help to increase the quality of education in the K-12 space. Let's jump to employability. When you look at bottom of the pyramid, and all due respect to my friends here in the manufacturing space, becoming teaching vocational skills and making them becoming factory workers or let's say plumbers or carpenters is not a path out of poverty. The thing is that I don't see any factory worker moving into the middle class, unfortunately. It's just a fact of the matter. The thing is that manufacturing by default has to keep factory salaries up to a certain level. You can't go beyond a point, because if the cost of manufacturing goes up, then very often you have to keep your product cost low, then you have to outsource to a cheaper country like, let's say, Bangladesh, Vietnam, or maybe now people are going to Africa. So you have that upper stop in the salaries. However, the thing is that when you look at the white collar world, right, you look at a lot of India's service industries are growing much faster than manufacturing. I mean, again, I'm not going to get into the economic issues, but I'm going to talk about the fact that that's where it is. Also, the chance of actually getting a white collar job in a bank or insurance company or something gives a kid a chance to get a salary of 20,000 rupees, 25,000 rupees entry level. Then it moves up. And that we've actually done that because we have a foundation that actually trains kids to get jobs in these white collar jobs. Now, the thing is that when you look at a lot of companies in the white collar world, corporate companies, and I'm sure all of you resonate with this, it's extremely difficult to find quality talent at the entry level, right? You say, look, I've got all these open jobs, but I can't find anyone who can speak English well enough, who doesn't have the selling skills, they don't have the soft skills. How do I put them in front of my customers? Like, let's say, if I'm, let's say, working in the insurance industry, I have to convince a certain customer to actually, let's say, buy insurance from me. I need to have a certain personality to allow me to do that. Those kids don't have that personality. So therefore, when you look at developing Raju the farmer's son into a white collar worker, you have to focus on definitely 2 or 3 things. One, of course, is enable them to speak English or at least language well. Like, in fact, when you go to Gujarat or let's say some other states, they're quite happy if the kid speaks Gujarati well, but can he convince people in Gujarati? That's very different from just knowing how to speak Gujarati. So selling skills in whatever language is relevant in that space is important. Soft skills, can you teach the kid to be professional? Can you teach the kid to be, let's say, very good at working with technology? Every kid today has to know how to use a computer very well. So the thing is that developing these sort of hard technology skills, developing the soft skills of the kid is actually a lot more important than just the theoretical knowledge. One of the biggest issues that we have in our current education system is that we focus more on gyan and giving stuff to actually pass the exams. Soft skills training is really just sort of at the tail end of our education system. We need to have soft skills development, language development, public speaking, selling skills as a key component of our complete education system, along with teaching the theories. Then, of course, they're more likely to get jobs. That's why it's very easy to hire kids from the elite colleges because they already have the personality. Raju, the dairy farmer's son, has no chance of getting a white collar job at this point unless you get them into that sort of education.
Akhil, I have a small question, Akhil, at this stage. What you have said is so thought-provoking. But then if you really look at it, someone like you, who is a PhD in education and PhD in employment generation,
right?
If I really look at it, 99.5% of education that's provided in India is just not having this kind of perspective.
Absolutely true.
So what is the missing link? Why is it that what you're saying makes so much sense, but why is it our education is targeted very differently? I mean, so what is the point in teaching chemistry and history and what Aurangzeb did or did not do, which year Battle of Panipat was fought? I mean, when it comes to, really making people more capable to be able to stand on their 2 feet.
Okay, so I'm glad you asked this question because I'm going to my favorite Peter Drucker quote, what can be measured can be managed, right? The thing is that so look at this way, right? The problem that we have as an industry is that we say when we want employable graduates, we don't define what that means. Very often, if you look at most of our job descriptions, when we post on Naukri or things like that, honestly, it's just qualitative statements. I want a dynamic guy. I want an ambitious person. I want someone who get the job done. What does that mean? So if I'm an academic institution and I look at all these job descriptions on Naukri that says dynamic, ambitious, blah, blah, with no standard, how do I create an education system that teaches thousands of kids to go down that path, right? So if you look at let's say the technology industry, right? When you look at programmers, why it's easier to get employable programmers? Because they've defined, okay, what it takes to be good at Python, what it takes to be good at Java, so the standards are set and training institutions can actually train people in Python and Java because that's defined. But when you look at soft skills, what is the standard for English? What's the standard for selling? What's the standard for communication skills? So I've always been telling this to all my industry friends that if you define models of saying, okay, this is exactly what I need in terms of, let's say, this person has to be able to sell this, and after the person has to be able to communicate this, and then you go backwards and work with colleges. And it may surprise you, there actually are some proactive colleges who are willing to listen to you. So you talk to them and say, look, this is your current curriculum. However, if you want to get your kids great jobs in, let's say, the banking industry or insurance industry or media industry or pharma industry, this is what we'd like you to do. And a lot of colleges nowadays are getting more autonomous, and they've got a lot of independent universities as well. If you can interact closer with them, you have more employability. And that's already happening in Europe. It's happening in a lot of other countries. But in India, we need to have a closer integration between industry and academia. Unfortunately, we can't have this barrier anymore. And industry can't tell academia, give me employ the kids, but I'm not going to help you to tell you how to get it done. So that was one of the missing links.
Akhil, can I say that any other thoughts you wish to add? We will come back to you.
No, I think I think mostly I've done. I think just when you talk about the whole concept of joblessness, for example, that's the last part of my talk. The thing is that theoretically the joblessness rate of India is 7%, but it doesn't mean that 93% of the people are working in white collar jobs and making piles of money. These are the people who are like what our governor said, are making pakoras, who are laboring in construction sites, who are working as farmers. They see, because the thing is that in India, if you don't have a job, you starve. There's no social security net. So you have to work. So by default, we have a low jobless rate. But the thing is that when you try to develop quality jobs for people, it goes back to putting the onus on industry. I mean, government can only help so much. Can we actually promote more independent entrepreneurs? Can we as industry, as large industry, can we mentor small entrepreneurs? Can we help to build up a lot of these SMEs up from the ground level, build up an ecosystem where there are a lot more jobs available at the white collar work, where you can actually pay knowledge workers a good amount of money. Hence, you have a lot more Rajus from the dairy farmer industry moving into the white collar world. So that's the last part of my talk. You're on mute. Rami, on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you so much, Akhil. Mr. Sanjay Datta will be the next speaker. He is Chief of Underwriting, Reinsurance and Claims of ICICI Lombard General Insurance Company. The whole intention of having someone from the life sector, someone from the non-life sector, it's very important to look at social security at the bottom of the pyramid. And while life provides some sort of a social security, but the non-life insurance, whether it be health insurance or it be asset insurance or things like that, provides a different kind of a security. Mr. Datta currently heads the underwriting, reinsurance and claims functions across ICICI Lombard and has been contributing extensively towards the surge in ICICI Lombard's position as a market leader. Mr. Datta has over 35 years of experience in the insurance industry, having been a part of the startup team in ICICI Lombard in 2001. Mr. Datta takes pride in the myriad roles he plays to perfection, be it as the customer service head for all product lines of the business, operational excellence, product development, and pricing across wholesale and retail products or underwriting. Mr. Datta drives the company's foray for quality service delivery across all product lines. Mr. Datta is a postgraduate in management. Sanjay, really delighted that you're part of our panel and we are all so keen to listen to you.
Thank you very much, for this generous introduction. And, I'm very, honored to be part of this esteemed panel, and this is a topic very close to, my heart. And so it's a double pleasure to be part of this panel. Having said that, I think, the current panel and the previous panel have talked about growth and also the challenges in, making sure that the way it percolates down to the bottom of the pyramid, growth is sustainable. So my limited, question here is, and the thought I would like to put forward is the whole issue of protection. You do wealth creation, but how do you protect wealth? Just give a very simple example. So currently, 4% of India's population, goes below the poverty line every time they have a catastrophic event in their lives in the form of a health event. Let's say, a cancer or something else. So all that wealth, gets created, gets, kind of destroyed. So, but let's take it slightly further, and let's look at the four aspects where I think when we look at protection from an, insurance perspective, one is mortality, which is the domain of life insurers, and I think it's been adequately addressed. then there is morbidity, which is the whole issue of diseases and how do we take care of the treatment as well as some all the fallouts out of that. And thirdly is asset insurance of every kind, financial assets, mobile assets, immobile assets. And last but not the least, we need to keep thinking about it as we go forward, is the liability aspects of everything. Liability is becoming a concern, whether it's cyber liability or various kinds of pollution liability, everything else. All of these impact the bottom of the pyramid the most. Like someone talked about the whole issue of a crisis and in the earlier panel and its impact on the bottom of the pyramid, all of this impacts. And and the big learning out of that was, we as, non-life insurers always, keep modeling on crises or catastrophes. So we do a lot of our modeling on things like flood, earthquake, and various other events. Some of the events that would have not happened in India so far to cause huge upheavals. Let's take earthquake, for example. And we keep modeling. And the other part, so we do that for what we call is an exposure on various risks. So a lot of our products are exposure products, and they we need to keep modeling in terms of what kind of exposure are we as a country and as insurers building up to be able to service these exposures in case of that in case that catastrophe occurs. But one of the key things we missed, or maybe which nobody, the entire world missed, is to look at exposure and health insurance. Because typically what happens is you have very relatively small claims, not like the kind of claims which you experience in a property portfolio where it could be hundreds of crores of rupees. So you just experience small claims and it becomes an experience product, and you keep doing it, keep reforming it and pricing it, and trying to improve penetration. We'll come to that later. But you forget the exposure coming out. Pandemic taught us that that there is exposure coming out of every product. And that's where pandemic taught us that lives and livelihood are entrenched. You can't basically take out, lives get impacted, livelihood gets impacted. And I'll just refer to that. It's a big learning coming out of the pandemic as we, get into the whole issue of protection. And the last and important part is the penetration issue. And that's where I think we are poised now after, let's say, 22 years of liberalization of the insurance industry, private sector being allowed to come in. A lot of private players have come in, but also the need for more private players is paramount. A lot of regulatory changes already, there, and a lot of regulatory changes in the offing. So we are at an inflection point in terms of how do we make sure, which is the vision the government has and the regulator has, of protecting all by by 2047. That's the 100 years of India's independence, and that's where we would like to have a goal of protecting everyone, insurance for all. So how do we arrive at that? Now, coming back to this whole lives and livelihood, just take a very simple issue. Factories got closed, people lost their livelihoods. We all talked about that. So what did it mean? People underwent health events. A lot of people, huge amount of, I think we as an industry paid, anything upward of 3 to 4, billion rupees in terms of claims for just treatment of infectious diseases. Now, this is something the Western world doesn't, deal with too much, because they have kind of eliminated, infectious disease treatment to a very, a very small amount of their healthcare spends. We in India continue to spend about 26, 20, 30, 40% of our spends on, infectious disease treatment. On top of that, this was a double whammy. We already deal with a lot of infectious disease, and in fact, this came in. And the other part of what happened, because all of these people who went in infectious diseases, some of them, unfortunately died, but the others who came out had also lost their livelihood. Now, this is where the lives and livelihood intertwine. And when we realized this, I think the regulator set up a committee to, look at this aspect also. How much of livelihood gets impacted by a pandemic event? Because what happens typically is a lockdown happens. And when a lockdown happens, people lose their jobs, or they kind of are not employed for certain periods of time, and that's where in certain some of the advanced countries they fill in with kind of payouts, government payouts to these industries to be able to take care of workers who are in furlough, so to speak. But in India, there's no such mechanism, as someone pointed out. So what do? So a small calculation, just imagine this, and I just wanted to look at the enormity of the livelihood problem at the bottom of the pyramid. If we were to look at paying workers on a lockdown for, let's say, 3 months, for, it could be not all India, but could be specific areas of India, something like 6,500 rupees per month for 3 months. The amount of, and, we would need to charge premium of 1,000 rupees, and the amount of capital required, and the backstop which is required to be able to make this payout at the same time, where enormous lockdown. It's not about paying to one particular company on a one particular time. We deal with health insurance. We deal with one thing. Each company or somebody else. But what happens typically is when a pandemic hits you, accumulation happens, which is exactly what happens in a catastrophe. We're hitting the entire a region or a country. And at that point of time, every SME is down. Everyone has lost their livelihoods. So the calculation of that is we would need 75,000 crores to be able to pay the 6,500 rupees for 3 months. And with the Indian insurance industry being able to provide only a capital of 2,000 crores, we would need a government backstop, for the rest of the money, for us to be able to do that. Put it in a reverse thing. If we were to collect the premium ourselves for this kind of payout, we would require 100 years of premium to be able to do 2 months of payout. So that's the enormity of the problem. That's the enormity of the the economic damage which such pandemics can cause, and we need to have mechanisms to protect it, both the lives as well as the livelihood. Now, the second part of what I wanted to talk about was the fact that all of this requires capital. All of this requires a structural mechanism. So there are a lot of ways which we would need to look ahead in terms of trying to understand, what do we need to do going ahead now that penetration is a huge problem. Non-life industry, as compared to the life insurance industry, we've reached a penetration of 1% of GDP after 22 years of liberalization. It was 0.5 at that point of time, it's 0.1. Most developed countries are around 5 to 6 percent. So we have a long way to go. Now, how do we do that? There are two types of ways of looking at these exposures. So one is the fact that I think it's fairly well recommended that insurance is a push product. It's an intangible product. It's very difficult to go and keep going ahead and building awareness. It's a long run effort. So some of the insurance elements, especially on things like natural disasters or pandemic, requires policy level changes where it's made mandatory, and we have ways of collecting premium or having government backstop on these kind of premiums, like let's say a natural disaster kind of pool or something else, which automatically pays out to a lot of these people who tend to remain uninsured. The gap between economic damage and insured damage is huge in India. So roughly 3 to 4% of damages get covered. The best kind of situation was the Chennai floods, where around 50,000 crores of damage, around 10% got covered. The rest typically tend to be 2 to 3%, especially talking from the non-life sector, tend to be covered by insurance. The other part, and if you bring that same lives and livelihood discussion to, let's say, corporates, a lot of these SMEs, one is the government paying out or the insurance paying out on loss of job. A lot of these SMEs, specifically a lot of corporates in India, do not have what is known as business interruption covers where there is no damage. For example, we don't have any cover for when a pandemic strikes and lockdown happens. There is no cover available in India so far. So that requires another specific level of intervention where we are able to create such mechanisms to be able to cover such risks. But typically what happens is most corporates, if you leave aside the large corporates, do not tend to have even business interruption covers. So their profits get affected when an event happens, even a catastrophic event happens. The factories, kind of needs to be rebuilt for 40 days or let's say even 1 year at times, and their profits drop and they become unviable. And once they become unviable, the easiest people who suffer are people at the bottom of the pyramids. They are let go, and they don't have any kind of unemployment insurance in India. So that's one segment which needs to be taken care of. Having said that, let's look at penetration. Just to kind of close on my particular thing, we need to have mechanisms which carefully weave in a lot of mechanisms which is now available to us in India. Two great examples. One is, of course, I think Jan Dhan, and how do we put in these social schemes together digitally and be able to weave in the premium. They're very, very cost effective schemes. till just about a month back, 2 lakhs insurance cover personal accident cost 12 rupees, and you just had to put a tick and it could be debited from your account. We have so many accounts, 45 crore Jandan accounts, and currently, let's say take the personal accident experience. So about 22 crores people are only covered. We have a huge way to go, but let's look at very innovative ways of getting coverage. Just 2 lakhs 12 rupees. That's for a year. What about 10 lakhs? 10 lakhs for a day's worth of travel. So that's something which innovation was done. IRTC, RTC started covering all the passengers on every train in India at levels as low as 50 paisa, 30 paisa. So for 30 paisa, we're getting a 10 lakh cover. So the person, a migrant labor going back to his town, God forbid, if some accident happens, he's got a 10 lakh coverage. Now, the issue with most of these coverages are you need to have a very structured way to go and approach and get this coverage. If you're not able to go and approach them through the distribution thing, you need to find mechanism like I just talked about, where you automatically cover them, either mandatory or these kind of mechanisms where they're built into the structure of the premium. They're very low premiums, you need to get them covered. And finally, I think coming back to the whole awareness issue, and I think it's a plea to Dr. Sahani, is that we need to build in financial literacy, including insurance literacy, into our curriculums as we educate people. China's already done that. 11 and 12, everything, they understand insurance. They are, heavily training people on risk, that this is an intangible product. You need to get yourself protected. All of that is just getting built in. Otherwise, we have this fatalistic, mode of, thought process that we'll only take insurance, if we require it, which is not the case. We should take it early, teach people how to protect themselves, where are the exposures lying, and how cost effective it is to take insurance. That in short is my opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. I must clarify that Mr. Atul Joshi, given my familiarity with all the panelists, had requested me to perform the introductions, and it was a joy for me to set the context for each one of your speakers. Over to you, Atul. The panel is all yours. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ram. Let me come to you, Dr. Khorakiwala, first. One thing which we discussed, which you mentioned in your speech, was about the kind of treatment that we get in India, and it is world-class treatment. However, you also mentioned that as far as the quality of treatment is concerned, we are rich, but the access to the quality treatment is concerned, we are poor. Now, the government does have several of these, let's say, institutions such as the ESIC hospitals. You mentioned about AIMS. There are several other such smaller institutions which the government owns. We have talked about partnership on PPP basis across different kinds of infrastructure, but nothing on this side, on the healthcare side. So what do you think the government should do or could do to ensure that a PPP model kind of a thing is initiated so that a quality of services, medical facilities is provided to far and wide and the poorest of the poor across the country? Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Atul. And thank you. You asked me the first question. And I must say at this stage that I will have to leave at 6:30 because I have another appointment, but I'll respond to this. There is enough time there. See, there are two aspects to this private part. I believe already in a way, the government is using public-private partnership in a very massive scale. In a sense that they are providing the entire private sector access to anybody and everybody for all kinds of procedures throughout the country. And they are paying for that. To my mind, it is a very nice way to do a private-public partnership. Because I was in FICCI as a president 15 years back, and we tried that physical managing the public sector institution. It's impossible. that structure will never work. As a person also, I tried in my hometown of Palanpur, and Mr. Modi was the chief minister, and he says, good luck to you if you can succeed. So we tried for 3 years and gave it up. So it doesn't work because there are so many wheels within the wheels in the government. So that kind of physical, it will not work. So, but this one is there, and this is where government must increase their spend and use existing private sector available, small, large, to do a lot of healthcare management. The other thought process is that today, a lot of healthcare management, the budget allocation is reasonably centralized. The central government is as state government is. My suggestion would be it should be completely decentralized at the lowest possible level, at the panchayat level and so forth. Give them certain resources. They know how best to use that money for their village. And along with that, they can say this what you require in a hospital or healthcare in terms of supplies, equipment, medicine, whatever is required. Develop a national rate contract or state rate contract and give the free budget for this to do it and develop adequate mechanism, because otherwise in normal it is inefficiently used. One thing is there, another thing is not there. The third element I would like to suggest is government hospitals are there in a private, government education institutes are there and private education institutes are there. In the private education institute, people pay whatever is a commercially reasonably viable medical fees. The government institution, if you look at the fee structure, is so low that nearly 90-95% is subsidized. So one, you are getting such high level of education, and there is very good education actually, both at MBBS level and higher education level. My suggestion is, since people get highly subsidized education, it must be obligatory for doctors to work in rural, semi-urban market for a certain period of time. Because there is a give and take. You get a very good quality education at such a highly subsidized, one must give a couple of years, because even if doctors spend 7, 8 years in getting their degrees. So that is the other, to get the doctors also, because just physical facility will not necessarily solve this problem. I'll give you one example of what we are doing in Wukat in Foundation. We have a mobile healthcare, which goes to deep villages where there are no doctors, no dispensary, nothing. Villages of 500 people, 1,000, 2,000 people. We go once a week with doctors and medicine free of cost. Go every week at a fixed point in time. And we cover we started with our own. We offer these services to anybody who wants it at cost, because it's a foundation. And we touch with this program and other programs nearly 2 to 3 million lives a year. So this is a kind of new innovative approach government should do to reach villages which are not reachable. Because I don't think when the healthcare problem is there, people can travel 20 kilometers or 10 kilometers and things like that. So the primary care can be given at the doorstep. For higher care, one can come to a larger places. So these are my initial thought of how public-private partnership can take place and how it can reach to the most rural areas, the healthcare.
No, excellent thoughts, Dr. Korakiwala. We don't really need to do a physical partnership, but we could do through insurance, we could do through education, making doctors travel and service in rural areas, extending, let's say, the CSR arm of some of the private institutions. Excellent thoughts. PPP did not necessarily be, let's say, a box-tight idea, watertight idea, but something out of the way. But that's where I would like to bring in Dr. Shubhda Rao. Doctor, India always gets compared to China. Whether it is finance, it's manufacturing, it is healthcare. And when we look at the social impact, these are the things. The economy drives healthcare. Healthcare, in a way, drives a part of the economy. How do you compare the paths taken by both these countries in the past and how they are moving today? Is there a switch that is happening? What do you see from your perspective?
That's a great question, Atul. I think, as you rightly said, India and China have been, forming a huge demand base for the world. And that's the reason why these two economies are very, very critical for the world to look in terms of growth engines. Interestingly, China started with agriculture, but quickly jumped to through the centralized planned economy to manufacturing as the biggest engine of growth. And since the 2000s, rather, since 2 decades, it's been a very interesting switch, as you rightly put it, for China. China has begun to very rapidly focus on services as the main growth engine. Across the spectrum, you've seen financial services, real estate, logistics, trade. These have been the bigger contributors of China's growth incrementally, to the extent that today China has almost, I would say, 53 to 54% in terms of services share in GDP. Very interestingly, the exact opposite was happening in India. India, I would say, just circumvented manufacturing, but straight from agriculture as an evolving economic society moved to services, and services which naturally and inherently come to India more easily, given the kind of cultural, socio-economic, mental makeup that Indians have. Services were the larger spearheading contributor to growth to the extent of almost 60% at a given point in time. And this is the time where we see now a complete, I would say, a mirror image of the switching of models is happening. China has moved to services. India is now moving to manufacturing. India's traditional share in manufacturing, I would put it, not more than 25 to 28% range as far as industry contribution to GDP is concerned. But over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a very palpable shift in the policy, and it got actually accelerated during the COVID times through the thrust given to the production-linked incentives to about 13 to 14 sectors, which incidentally are expected to take the share of GDP of industry from 25, 28 levels to about 40 plus levels. And more importantly, they are expected to create over the 5 years at least 10 million jobs. So it's a very interesting exercise and a switch that has happened. China from domestic manufacturing to services, and from exports to domestic consumption. And India is actually shifting to from services to manufacturing, and of course, to, in recent times, you saw the export thrust, the kind of trade deals that we have done in the recent past, and some on the anvil, be it in UK, Eurozone, Israel. We've already done with Australia and UAE. So the thrust is clearly to ensure that India is also becoming a manufacturing hub for the world. And that's how the whole Atmanirbharta comes. To your second question, and I'll be very brief there, China has always adopted more of a preventive healthcare approach in terms of administering through its traditional or modern medicinal treatments, whereas India has focused predominantly on primary healthcare. The differences could be subtle, but more importantly, once again, I see a shift here happening. India has begun to incrementally, the pace is very slow, but Mr. Kuraki-Wala would address that and maybe verify what I'm saying is, perhaps in recent times, we've seen a gentle, subtle shift in terms of preventive kind of approach to healthcare. And that preventive approach has come by more through the traditional route is what I observe. More through, traditional medical kind of disciplines, more through yoga. These are the kind of things I see peripherally at the periphery changing and shifting in terms of India. So it's an interesting exercise. We need to know which system delivers best. But at the end of the day, as our speakers earlier spoke, it's how we deliver not to the rich, but how efficiently quickly and cost effectively be delivered to the poor would be the game changer as far as India's healthcare is concerned.
I completely agree. Very well explained, the switch model. And I think moving to the manufacturing would create a lot of jobs for the blue collar. The Rajus of Palghar should get jobs somewhere if they are not, let's say, able to go to the next level. Dr. Korakola, you were saying something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think in terms of preventive approach in India, the best work we have done is through vaccination over the last 40, 50 years. And that is a great preventive actually to a lot of diseases.
Yeah.
Other than that, we have not done much, to be candid.
Sure.
Today, you look at spread of malaria, spread of diarrhea. More people, you may be surprised to know, during the COVID 2.5 years died of malaria in India, more people died of diarrhea than the COVID itself. Because these are the silent diseases that happens more in a rural area, urban setting, because if we have to control that, we have to control this kind of water bodies, which creates the mosquitoes and spread these diseases, dengue, malaria. Second, the quality of water. Quality of water is very important to prevent a lot of diseases like diarrhea. It's purely water. The quality of water is bad, and that is what leads to some of diseases. So we have to go a long way in managing some of the diseases, and some of the diseases are increasing. That is, if you see worldwide, it is coming down. Even in Africa, some of these are coming down. But in India, malaria, for example, is a spreading, increasing trend is there. And to my mind, this is a fairly important area, I think as a country, we must address quickly, rather than medicine and hospitals and other things. But this preventive aspect, which you rightly highlighted, we have done an outstanding job as far as the vaccination is concerned. But these are the two other areas we need to focus more.
Thank you, Dr. Korakiwal. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being with us. I think you wanted to leave at 6:30. I would just request the rest of the participants to just hold on for a quick round of questions, just 2 minutes each, if I'm allowed. Let me come to you.
Thank you very much for everyone. Wonderful listening to all of you, and happy to participate.
Habil bhai, any closing comments you would like to make? I mean, you've been such an important part of this panel, but a couple of words you want to just leave us
No,
with.
I just wanted to say, which we were discussing with Mr. Atul Joshi earlier. Then he was asking about something on medical tourism. And I wanted to make one important comment and observation there. I'm not talking traditionally, from Africa and others who could get people coming here, and that is what we do. But there is a very unique opportunity India is having today. Because of COVID, there is an enormous backlog of surgical procedures pending in most part of the world, especially in Europe. Just to get you an example where we have a very strong presence in UK, the elective surgery, and we are not talking of emergencies, you can't deal with it. So what happened in COVID, because the hospital were packed, everything, emergency was managed. So elective surgery got postponed. And as a result, today they have a backlog of between 500,000 to 1 million surgeries. And I don't believe they will be able to clear for next 5 to 10 years. And that is where an opportunity may exist. If India can put together with insurance, with various other people, a process, because costs of procedures are less. Even if we consider total costs of people coming here, procedures, staying and going back, probably we will be able to, not the extra costs to the government there, probably we will cover their operative costs there. So this is, to my mind, a great opportunity. We need to put some kind of a think tank and how we can capture. We have a lot of facilities available on the other end here, and very fairly widespread. So probably we may be able to do a significant part of that as a part of medical tourism.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all of
Thank you
us.
so much.
Thank you so much. Sir.
Let me pick up that point and come to you, Sanjay. Is there a chance that the insurance companies, the general insurance companies in India tie up? I'm sure there are a lot of tie-ups with the foreign insurance companies, which in turn tie up with the government-backed insurance. For example, the UK has the National Health Sector regulator, which provides the insurance to the citizens. And the surgeries which are performed in India are covered or facilitated across the certified hospitals, which are certified by, let's say, or approved by or empaneled by the health insurance providers in the country. Do you think that as a possibility?
Yes, it's an interesting idea and a thought. But typically, for us to pay for such things, we would typically need to be reinsuring it. It's the other way around. We should be reinsuring the risk of foreign players who would then because of cost issues, cost effective treatment here, they would then sponsor, and we would then be able to facilitate that. So we already, let's say, for sitting in India, we as some of the players in India, including us, we reinsure a few of the portfolio of the Middle East and Africa. Correct. I mean, we could go and extend this to have tie-ups with other things. We already have tie-ups with various health insurance companies abroad. That is mostly for our people who go there for, let's say, travel or some international coverage. They go there and then they get treatment there. We have tie-ups with them. We could do a reciprocal with them. It's an interesting idea, and it is good because just take for example, and I just heard this, and that's why India is so different. In Canada, we just incidentally, all our health insurance companies just 1 year back, because of regulatory things, we cover all kinds of mental illnesses, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. Now, in India still it's easy to access, psychologists or psychiatrists, but in Canada it seems that, and I'm having from very distinguished sources, they say there's a 6-month backlog to even just go and access a psychiatrist. So there is this kind of thing, building up, in terms of where we could exploit and, we run products and be able to become, instead of the manufacturing hub, the servicing hub of the world. Yeah.
No, certainly, it's a very interesting thought. And, instead of outbound, maybe we start looking at inbound insurance and how to cover it. That's a very interesting idea. Let me come to you, Mr. Mahesh. When we look at life insurance, one of the key aspects, I mean, including myself, I would look at life insurance not just as life insurance. I would want some return out of it. So people are always confused that, when I'm buying a life insurance, am I really buying a life insurance or am I buying a savings product? Which, company gives me higher return, percentage return, higher money, blah, blah. So, how do you deal with that kind of situation? What is it that you see on the ground? The life insurance on its pure play or life insurance with, the kind of investment option therein?
So I'll give you two sides to it. One is, let us take a person who has taken a unit policy, purely depending on the market returns and all that kind of thing, and he's doing it only for the investment part of it, and he says, I want so much returns after say 5 years, 7 years, whatever. And unfortunately, in the last 2 years, because of COVID and because of other reasons, a lot of such people actually lost their lives. And what happened was, so if you have a policy where, like you are investing 1 lakh a year or 10 lakhs a year, you get a cover of say 50 lakhs. Okay. And you are supposed to be investing 10 lakhs every year. The person lost his life after 1 year. His family got 50 lakhs. He had only invested 10 lakhs. So, if you look at that product, it is not only a savings product, it's also actually insurance, real insurance. Okay. Because if he builds up to 50 lakhs or whatever is the NAV related value that he has after 5 years, after the build up period, his family stands to get that amount which is invested or the sum assured if he is still covered by insurance. So it is not a question of either or. Even the savings products are giving very good coverage. It's not a. But coming to the other part, So if you want to make it really affordable, and we are talking about the bottom of the pyramid, so today PMJJBY, you get a cover of 2 lakhs life insurance for just 436 rupees a year. And that is something which you would not get anywhere else. And so that is also the truth, and this is also the truth. And we do have another product which is very popular with our customers, and that is the term with return of premium. So what happens is that you get a term insurance cover, but whatever premiums you paid, the numerical the addition of those amounts, the arithmetic total will be given back to you at the end of the period. So if you have a term insurance for say 10 years and you are paying 1,000 rupees as premium, you get 10,000 rupees at the end of the period. Now, if you look at time value of money and all, it is not really a great amount, but then it satisfies the Indian question, of what do I get at the end of the period if I don't die? And I mean, I think it could be called a very stupid question, but then we have been seeing that for insurance penetration in India took place with that product. So we were seeing only traditional product. There was no pure protection product initially, and therefore people got used to this kind of a thing, that they need some returns at the end of the period. The term with return of premium is a very good product. So we have all kinds of products, and as I said earlier also, education is the main important thing. Financial literacy, most people, who are educated are not financially literate. So one point with Mr. Datta made, teach in schools, teach them young, teach them about insurance when they are very young, so that when they grow up, they don't ask this question. And, they get themselves covered properly and they decide which product suits me better, for my needs.
Sure. Very, very interesting point. Sanjay ji, you wanted to say something, please. Akhil ji, I will come to you. Just give me 1 minute. I have one question for you, which I'm not going to let you go off like that. So please bear with me. Sanjay ji, please.
In terms of affordability, that was a question which came up in one of the chats. Affordability is extremely important, as Mr. Sharma so well explained. If you look at it, from a mechanism perspective, there's nothing better than life insurance when you're looking at long-term coverage. Life insurers, are looking at, leave aside the savings element, at least on non-life, we don't have anything savings. But the risk coverage, which, is there long term, it takes, and, you can only, invest with companies which are solvent, which are great. And, you would need to then, invest for 10 to 100-year coverages, let's say cradle to grave coverages, a child born until he dies. And that's that in health insurance, thankfully. Health insurance also gives cradle to grave coverage. You cannot be chucked out of the health insurance portfolio. But the issue with health insurance is, and that's the point which comes in, is affordability, because it is linked to the cost of healthcare.
Yes.
And so that's one aspect where we need to partner very well, including doing preventives, which we talked about through vaccination, and we've already started on that journey. Getting a lot of OPD coverage, which also is a preventive in a sort. You can actually stop all your things. You can conserve your resources on, the smaller incidents you can treat on an OPD basis and not let people go to hospitals and use up that money. And last but not the least, I think we tend to forget the livelihood question of health insurance, which, life insurers do. They have add-ons on critical illness. This is very important. What happens if you don't die? You need to support yourself because of a critical illness. It's very easy to, go and get a, thing on chronic renal failure. You can get your dialysis. What happens to your livelihood? You need a huge payout, which normal insurance will not give. And if then you need these critical illness riders for a lifetime. That's where life insurance comes in very strongly. Livelihood protection, because of morbidity events, people tend to forget. It's only mortality. What about morbidity? Leading to livelihood issues. That's one big thing we can scale up in India. It gives a lot of protection.
Very, very good thought. Very good thought. Before I come to you, Akhil, let me just narrate one incident. This was narrated to by one of the PSU chiefs of one of the insurance companies. And this is going back to late 80s, early 90s. There was a government scheme on life insurance and they wanted it to be marketed. And they gave the targets to the PSU insurance chiefs. I mean, at that point in time, there were no private sector insurance companies. So, they had to go out and, market this life insurance, and government given target, timelines, etc. They had an issue. There is no television in the villages, right? There is no mobile phone. How do you, most of them are not even literate. We are talking about late 80s, early 90s. So how do you even explain to them that there is an insurance available? So one of the ideas that came up and which was implemented was that they decided to sell insurance outside the cremation grounds. And that actually helped them fulfill the targets very, very quickly, which is what, Sharmaji was saying, that, to explain that you're going to die is a very difficult sell. But this is an innovation, and this is where India kind of scores above every other country, lateral thinking. So one question to you, Akhil. India, whenever we look at media, talks about very high unemployment. But at the same time, if I look at, when I speak to, let's say, corporate houses or even to farmers or to service providers, they tell me, nahi hai. There's nobody available. If I want a driver, I don't have a driver. If I want a maid, there is no maid. If I want a factory worker, there is no factory worker. I'm looking for an electrician. He's charging me a bomb. So, where is this disconnect that there is an unemployment, which the economists talk about, I myself talk about, that, there's unemployment in this country. At the same time, there is no worker available. How do you combine the two from your perspective, from the education perspective? And what is the bridge that should be done to kind of cater to this? Over to you.
Well, firstly, and again, all due respect to my friends in the media, if you believe the media, this world will be the worst place to live in, because obviously pictures of people being jobless gets more headlines than saying that, okay, most people are actually quite happy and they go back home and they have a good 3 meals a day. And so let's take the media extreme out of the way, right? But I think you addressed a point which I think is more important in terms of saying, look, the problem is that for a lot of service industries, right, for example, even if, for example, in manufacturing, you can't find the trained talent. That is really what's happening, right? So what happens is that when you start, and going back to our favorite Rajat Palgar, if he's not trained, he will have to find some job somewhere, right? He cannot sit at home and say, look, I'm jobless. So he will either have to be a farmer, he'll either have to come to the town and maybe sell vegetables in the market, or may have to work as an Amazon delivery boy. He has got a job. May not be a great job, but he's got a job. So that point is not there. The problem is that here as companies, we're saying, look, the talented people are not there. Now, funnily, when you went back to the 70s, 50s and 60s, the concept of untrained talent didn't exist. Why? Because a lot of companies, Tata's, for example, like you take, let's say, Jamshedpur, they said, look, part of our work is actually to train freshers in the job. That means that like when people entered your company, you assume they didn't know anything. The company said, we will actually spend 3 months, 6 months training them to be productive. And that was a given. However, unfortunately, because of the focus on profitability and making sure we cut costs, the concept of training freshers has gone out of the window. Today, except for a few more proactive companies who spend a lot of time and effort training their freshers, most of the time the companies say, look, we don't have the money to train these people. We want ready trained people. So that's one part. The other part is the nature of jobs themselves will become more complex. In the good old days, you could be like a data entry person. You would have a repetitive, routine job, and that was good enough. Now what's happening is that a lot of repetitive, routine work has become automated. So therefore, the people that you want are people who can think on their feet, who are proactive, the softer skills part. But there's no definition for that. And again, the companies are not willing to train for that either. So the way to look at it would be either the companies say, look, if we have a shortage of talent, we ourselves will try to create a captive train. Take example, L&T, for example, does that very well with their train, and they don't have a problem with trained talent. I think a lot of companies like HUL and all that do have a strong, Tata's have a strong talent training mechanism. They don't have a problem attracting talent. The problem is the SMEs, the mid-sized companies say, look, we don't have the training budget. We have a tough time finding talent. We don't have the brand to attract the talented people. So unless the company say, okay, let's spend money on training, or the colleges or the institutions say, okay, let's try to build up softer skills in the people, and that's like another 1 hour lecture, you'll have that mismatch happening.
Sure. And maybe one
Mr.
thought
Joshi,
here
can
is that if you could...
minute, Mr. Joshi, there are a couple of questions that are there in the chat box. If you can just have a look.
Yeah, sure. Just before that, just completing with Akhil that, just to take forward an example from China, where they actually built workers' colonies, whereby the accommodation of the migrant labor was addressed. his costs of accommodation came down. They were given community, lunch and dinner kind of a kitchen, community kitchen. So their cost of living per se came down, and there was a ready-made pool available of talent to the manufacturing clusters close by. That is how I think they managed not just the cost, but also the issue of availability of the labor. Maybe something to learn. Let me just go over to the chat box and see what's.
I think there is one question that our president has asked. Shubhadar, don't you think that China has strategically done the right thing of putting manufacturing ahead of services, as services depend on a good manufacturing base and not the other way around? So now you can speak on topic 1.
Yes, I think the answer is between yes and a no, because definitely that's the rational way and logical way of developing your manufacturing first. And naturally, the derivative is what the services sector do, because unless and until you produce, what are you going to trade? What are you going to transport? So yes, that logic absolutely works well. Where India stood out in terms of services were predominantly export of services. I think India has traditionally been a net exporter of a large scale of its services, software services, and in recent times, the business services. So what was a natural advantage for India was being able to produce hundreds and thousands of engineers, the software engineers, and the back office guys who actually could serve the world through the export of services. And that's how for India, this model worked. But yes, in a closed economy, as we say, typically if you do not have exports, China exported the merchandise goods, India exported the services, so tradables versus non-tradables. But as we look at the newer regimes, newer controlled environment, yes, logically, you need to have equal and prior attention being given to manufacturing, and later then services derive their value from your domestic economic activity. But in an open world, I think you can thrive as well by exporting services. On that point, I feel that, who knows, 5 to 10 years later, India is going to be physically exporting labor as well. If you look at the working age population that India would continue to benefit with right from now to 2040, 2050, and you look at the global demography, India is soon going to be not just sitting at home exporting services, but actually physically on the shop floor. It's well possible that India would be exporting labor force for the global manufacturing as well. That's my own perception. I could be wrong, but maybe Akhil could validate or not validate that.
If I may add, Doctor, there, that India's services sector base was actually built as the service provider to the service provider. For example, there was a software requirement, India built the software code. If there is a medical transcription required, India built the medical transcription. Absolutely. But I think the whole dynamics of manufacturing being as the base of services is changing with the advent of social media. Today, the number of jobs that the social media and the IoT has created is mind-boggling, and it's not even based on manufacturing, so to speak. There's a different kind of demand, and that's where we are. I think we have fairly exceeded the time frame. So maybe I thank Dr. Korakiwala, Dr. Shubhadar Rao, Sanjay. Thank you so much for being there and patiently listening to all the speakers and then contributing so very well. Akhil, thanks so much. Your thought process has really done very, very well for us to take home some points. And life insurance, a lot to learn. I shall think about mutual funds in a very different light after learning from Maheshji, from you. And thank you so much for being there with all of us. Thank you so much. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so very much. Can I request Mr. Shashin Shah to give a vote of thanks? And I am so grateful personally to all the panel members for a brilliant contribution to the session.
A pleasure.
Shashin Shah is co-chair of the Industry and Trade Committee and a very successful entrepreneur, deeply into the manufacturing sector, and and doing some phenomenal stuff in terms of creating tomorrow's India. Go ahead, Shashin. Please
Shashin, you're on
unmute.
mute.
Shashin.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
It was a fantastic session. I mean, it's nearly 4 hours now since we've been hearing these esteemed panelists. So it's my great privilege to propose a vote of thanks at the end of this event, the IMC CEO Conclave, Reigniting Growth and Accelerating Social Equity, organized by IMC. At the outset, I must thank our esteemed speakers, Mr. Dharmkirti Joshi, Chief Economist, CRISIL, Mr. Harjeet Singh Swani, Director Swani Spice Mills Private Limited, Mr. KVS Manian, President Corporate Institutional and Investment Banking, Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited, Mr. A. Balasubramanian, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC Limited, Mr. Atul Joshi, Founder and CEO, Oyster Capital and Advisory, Dr. Shubhda Rao, Founder, Quant Eco Research, Dr. Habil Khorakiwala, Founder Chairman, Walkhard Limited, Mr. Sanjay Datta, Chief Underwriting, Reinsurance and Claims, ICICI Lombard General Insurance Company Limited, Dr. Akhil Sahani, Managing Director, Sahani Group, Mr. Mahesh Sharma, MD and CEO, SBI Life Insurance Company Limited. Thank you all these esteemed speakers for sparing your valuable time for being with us today. As we slowly open up the world economy and learn to live with what has turned out to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, almost all businesses will be looking to figure out a way to grow their businesses as quickly as possible and as fast as the current situation will allow them to grow. The global crisis and its personal ramifications have presented all of us a unique opportunity to find new identities, new roles, new jobs that can suit our talents, ambitions, and purposes. For those who want a life of excellence and impact, it may be time to forge a new path. At the same time, understanding the importance of economic and social equality is important. Accelerating economic and social equality for women has become the need of the hour. Many Indian women are global leaders and influential voices in distinct fields. Still, most of the right, because of the intensely entrenched patriarchal beliefs, standards, traditions, and arrangements. Gender gaps are prevalent in all spheres of life and infer losses in terms of productivity and standard of living to the concerned individuals and the nation. For a sustainable tomorrow and promoting business excellence, a strong woman representation in the boardroom and in the middle and junior workforce is paramount for all the organizations. Invigorating the upcoming generation to focus on economic and social equality is crucial, and it's important to maintain the balance for all-round growth of a country. The interactive panel discussions during the event brought together industry leaders at IMC platform to work towards recovery of the economy, to gather their views to solve current issues of businesses, suggesting possible recommendation to almost all sectors of the industry. On behalf of IMC, I would wish to extend sincere thanks to all the representatives of the MSME sector, eminent business executives, business owners, representatives from the Industry Association, and all the people who have participated in today's interaction and event. At the least, would like to thank the IMC Secretariat for organizing a successful event. Once again, thank you all for sparing your time for today's event. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
My personal thanks and gratitude also. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.